Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Thursday episode, this long awaited, much hyped episode of A Flawed Man of God. I'm your host, Stuart Davis. I am a deacon at a small church just outside of Richmond, Virginia. I am not a pastor, I am not a biblical scholar, and I have not been to seminary. I'm not trying to get you to join my church or to donate to any special cause. What I am here to do is give you some exposure, a look into the life, thoughts, feelings, impressions of what I consider myself to be as an average Christian. Just trying to live in the Word each day, addressing my faults and my failings, um, and being a better person and being a better Christian and walking a life more pleasing to Jesus Christ. And if you're interested, if you are interested, if you're not a Christian and you're just interested in starting a relationship with God, welcome to the program. This is a great place to possibly start getting some information. We're not a funny cult or anything for that is going to make you do weird things. What we are is basically the same as you. We have a faith in Christ as our Lord and Savior, and we try to live the life in the way that in the example He has set before us. So, with that said, I do have on the program with me someone who is a pastor, is a biblical scholar, has been to seminary, I'm assuming.
And I
And
will
this,
try to get you to join my church. Like everyone who's listening to this, I'm going to look into the camera here. You should move to St. Louis, Missouri, and come to Prince of Peace Lutheran Church. It will change your life. And if it doesn't, I don't know. If it
you've already
doesn't.
moved.
You've already moved. You're not going to move again. You already made one mistake. You're not going to, it'll be fine. It'll be good.
It's a it's a great thing if you are part of a good church that is well grounded in the Word and has people that you can connect with. It literally will change your life, and it'll change your afterlife as well.
Yeah, that's true. I do. You should definitely go to a great church. And one of the things, though, that like I believe you in your intro when you said you're not trying to get anyone to join your church. But I get annoyed when churches will do things like so they'll do some kind of community outreach thing, and they go, "We're not trying to get people to join our church," and you go, "Yeah, you are, though." I mean, and it's okay if you are. Like if you believe that what you're saying is true and that it benefits people and that it will bestow upon people the salvation that Jesus won for them. It's not a bad thing to be like, "Hey, you should come to our church," right? Or when churches are like, "We're not trying to get your money." And you're like, I mean, you're not trying to get their money though. Like you do want them to become members who will support the preaching ministry of the congregation so that other people can hear the gospel, right? So it's like it's not that you're outreaching to people simply because you're trying to fill your offering plates, but it's not true that you 100% don't want their money. It's like if a pretty lady's on the side of the road and a guy pulls over to help her change her tire. Like he's not doing it to get a date, but he's also not doing it to not get a
I'm
date.
not
Right.
motivated.
Right. Like he's hoping that will be the way that things go, and he can hope that in a perfectly sanctified way.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's hard for churches to try to get. It's the obstacle that churches who have taken advantage of other people. But
Right.
it's hard for churches to promote the idea that the money is a means to an end. But we teach it's bad
Right.
because of the greed and and your greed for it, your lust for it, that you need more of it, that you serve a master other than God
Right.
when you crave it. So
Yeah.
it's always a sensitive subject because every time it comes up, like a tithing message comes up
Right.
at church, I'm sitting there going,
Yeah.
looking around, just watching everybody brace themselves. But it's a reality.
Yeah, you got to talk about it. Jesus talks about money all the time, and I
Yeah.
mean, and if you're not supporting your congregation at all, there is probably a spiritual problem there. So it's not a problem that's just simply solved merely by you putting money in the offering plate. But Um, but yeah, when you recognize that the gospel is the most precious thing in the entire world, you certainly should be motivated to support it. And one word of encouragement I would give to congregations on that front is that the thing that will make people want to support your congregation the most is preaching about the forgiveness of sins in Jesus Christ. So if you're not doing that a lot, then you shouldn't expect, if you're not giving the people the thing that creates the desire to actually give, then a lot of times they don't. And if you're kind of bullying them into it or frightening them into it, that may work in the short term, but it doesn't actually benefit them in any spiritually significant or beneficial way.
No, I don't think fear wins hearts and minds. It does.
Yeah.
It can be a persuasive factor to just get somebody to say yes. It doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean that you're
Right.
going to get somebody to buy in. And
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
they do, the motivations at that point, I start to get worried about.
Sure.
But church membership is hopefully the end goal of this. But the topic for tonight is humor, and
Sure.
I have asked Hans to come on here and talk about humor because I stumbled upon his YouTube somehow and saw him talking about humor and snark within the Lutheran Church, which that is the denomination in which Hans is a pastor in. And I found it very compelling and very thoughtful and
Thank you.
humorous as well, especially because he was talking to other pastors. So you got to wonder
Mm.
where humor leads in a group like that. I like the punchy factor that you had spoken about it. That's where I'd like to be sometimes.
Hmm.
But his put I've put his YouTube channel, which I followed as soon as I started watching him, in the description of the YouTube here. So follow that by all means. It's called Lutheran Satire. It's very good commentary. It's from a Lutheran angle, but it's easily relatable. And if you read the comments on a lot of his videos, that's I'm a Catholic and this is hilarious, or I'm Baptist and this is hilarious. It's very well rounded and it's self deprecating in many ways because and I think that's an honest take. And what I got out of it was really that one of the questions I had for you really is baptism saves? Haven't you ever heard of the thief on the cross?
Yeah, so that's one of the videos I did about a year ago or so, a little over a year ago. Where so what I try to do with with my channel, Lutheran Satire, is I try to cover a variety of topics, and one of the things I have found is that humor can be a very helpful tool for picking arguments apart, in particular, picking bad arguments apart, because when you're using humor, you're able to get closer to things than you normally would if you're not. And so when you kind of approach things tongue in cheek, you can kind of get away with saying more biting things that cause you to kind of disassemble an argument much quicker. Yeah, so that was one where you can watch the video. What about the thief on the cross? But it was a video where I was responding to, because when you're a Lutheran, and so Lutherans believe in baptismal regeneration. We believe that baptism confers salvation, that it grants forgiveness, life, and salvation, and that's placed into baptism by the Word of God as the salvation of Jesus, which we draw out of baptism through faith. So oftentimes when Lutherans talk about their position on baptism, you'll have someone say, well, the thief on the cross wasn't baptized. And I see this comment come up all the time.
All the
And
time.
yeah, and so I wanted to make a video that was something. I'll do this from time to time, where I try to make a video where it's kind of intended for people to be able to throw it into the comments of an online discussion, so that they don't have to just rehash the argument that I make in the video over and over and over again in 500 different places. And so the video basically goes through and it answers from a Lutheran perspective that objection to the thief on the cross argument with a what I hope is a rather clever twist at the end of the video. So that's basically what folks
Yeah,
can.
and I thought you did an excellent job because I'm one of the people. You did a very good job illustrating something that I'm not good at, because a lot of times it's like they need to be baptized. And I'm like, no, you don't need to be baptized. I mean, there might be like the thief on the cross is a perfect example. Did
Mhm.
not have the opportunity, made that, was able to, make that decision and make that thing right there. But I don't. But the way you do it is kind of in reverse. It's like, yes, baptism is a path to is a saving
Right.
act. Not saying it doesn't mean you have to have it, but it
Well,
is
yeah.
there.
Well, one of the Lutherans oftentimes will say that baptism is necessary for salvation, but not absolutely necessary. Meaning
Right.
that, or there's a phrase that one of my seminary professors used to use, that it's not so much the absence of baptism that condemns, but the rejection of baptism that condemns. So in other words, if a man comes to faith by picking up a Bible and reading it, and then is driving to church on the Sunday when he's supposed to get baptized and gets hit by a bus, we recognize that God still brought him to faith through the Word. Baptism is not the only means through which the gifts of God are given. So that man certainly still inherits eternal life. But the man who despises and rejects his baptism, that baptism, or the man who's not baptized because he despises the idea of baptism, right? That it's
Right.
that lack of faith through which he's condemned. And one of the other arguments or the other points I make in the video too is that it's not actually until after the resurrection, it's in the what's typically called the Great Commission, that baptism is formally instituted as a sacrament. So saying that the thief on the cross wasn't baptized is effectively the same thing as saying David or Abraham wasn't baptized. That well, of course not, but that was prior to baptism being instituted as a sacrament. Now, it's a bit of a, obviously you're in a bit of a different category because you had John's baptism and then leading
Right.
into that. But
That was
but
going to
in,
be my question.
no, go ahead.
No, well, because you do have John the Baptist out there baptizing people before
Right.
this, obviously. So obviously there's a thing there.
Right. So
Between.
so there was baptism was approaching what it would be.
Mhm.
But if you're looking for the moment where you say Christ commands his followers to be baptized, it doesn't actually happen until after the resurrection.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
that's essentially the point there.
okay.
So
And so that's one of the many ones that he has. Like I said, it's I find it very funny. That's why I invited him on here, because I was like, hey, you can
thanks.
talk about humor because he's a funny guy. But that one, the speaking in tongues with Pentecostal church, with C-3PO in the Pentecostal church,
Yeah.
and Kenneth Copeland, Satan wearing a Kenneth Copeland suit. Those are
That was a fun one to write. It was basically just I like okay, so I'll try to explain to people my sense of humor, which I think I came to understand from taking stock of where I grew up. So I was born in Minnesota. Then when I was just a few months old, we moved to Utah, where I lived until I was 7. And then I moved to Norwalk, Connecticut, which is basically essentially part of the New York Metroplex, New York City Metroplex. And then when I was almost 13, moved to Indiana. So my life is like a wholesome sandwich with bitterness and stress in the middle of it, having lived on the East Coast. So I think that went a long way towards forming my sense of humor, which is that I like wholesomeness and I don't like vulgarity, but I also like incredibly dark humor and bitter cuttingness. Um, and the Kenneth Copeland video is probably a good example of that, where I like insult comics who don't use profanity, which is a very small group. So it's like classic Don Rickles, that kind of stuff.
oh
So
yeah,
the Kenneth Copeland video was an observation that Kenneth Copeland is very obviously demon possessed and very obviously looks demon possessed, and yet the fact that people still just throw money at him when he's so obviously a demon. is nuts, but it shows how desperate people are to earn their own salvation, basically.
Right.
And but so yeah, but it's just basically a bunch of jokes, just a bunch of insult comic jokes about how Kenneth Copeland. I don't remember what any of them were at this point, but you can go watch the video
Yeah,
and
go watch
see
the
what they
video,
do.
and then I advise you afterwards because he does a couple of cutscenes of the Inside Edition interview
Oh
about his
gosh. Yeah.
personal plane. Watch the whole
Oh my
thing.
gosh. It's,
It
it's
is creepy. He looks like a Muppet.
it's one of those things where you like if I ever got to meet him, I would want to ask him like, all right, you know that interview you did on Inside Edition where you were talking about the plane and you were like, he made that airplane so cheap for me, I just had to buy, um, and would just want to just say to him like, what would someone else have to do for you to think, oh, that guy's creepy? Like,
Yeah.
if you don't think that your response was the most psychotic, creepy thing in the world, what what would someone have to do in order for you to go, dude, you got to tone it down a little bit? That's kind of nuts.
Obvious demon is obvious.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And that's very true for me. And because I usually say this at the beginning of the program, I'm non-denominational, and I'm very much, and I'm not really married to any doctrine. I think there's a lot of good things and a lot of wholesome, and a lot of wholesome doctrine that's out there. And there's some stuff that I disagree with that I feel like is it might get you closer to God. But I don't think it's gonna not buying into it. If we talk about Calvinists, and predestination and stuff like that,
Mhm.
maybe that's true. Maybe it's true. I don't think it is. I don't. That to me, that's the one I struggle with the most. Is personally, I don't really agree with it, but I know a lot of people who are really burning for Christ that do. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like one of those things where I can't. I don't want to. I don't want to bag on them too hard. So I'll use like your typical Babylon B style predestination quips here and there,
Mhm.
about things. But being non-denominational, we're kind of floating out there near the end of edge of baptism and or Baptists and
Right.
evangelicals, and then you got the Pentecostals who are like out
Yeah,
there.
there's from a Lutheran's perspective. In my experience, most of the time when I meet people and they tell me they're non-denominational, if I ask a couple of questions, they're usually just Baptists who are too cool to call themselves Baptists, or who've never been told that they're Baptists. But if you go on their church's website and look at the answers to theological questions they offer, it's pretty standard Baptist type stuff. But then there's like a newer strain of non-denominationalism where it's like they realize that and they're really making a concerted effort to be non-denominational, and that they'll say on their website like there's a whole host of issues we don't take a position on because we have people that disagree about these things. And that's weird to me. And I feel like it would be, if you didn't like, let's say there's a guy you didn't like who's the pastor of that church, you could really mess things up for him really easily by just joining his church. And every time they go, we believe this, you go, oh, I don't believe that, and they go, ah, shoot, we got to put that on the list of things that we don't have a position on now because that guy disagrees with it. So it's a bit of an odd thing. No, I think there are one of the things that we should of course always be humble about, and like this is what as a Lutheran, one of the things that is sort of odd to me is so Lutheranism is a series of doctrines rooted in a collection of writings known as the Book of Concord. And so it includes Martin Luther's Small and Large Catechism, the Augsburg Confession, what's called the Apology of the Augsburg Confession, and a number of other writings that were written basically by the first and then kind of second generation of Lutherans. So the first round of writings was written basically theological disputes with the Roman Catholic Church, and then the second round was theological disputes with the growing Calvinist movements that were kind of growing inside of Lutheranism. So it was proper Lutherans distinguishing themselves from Calvinists. So Lutherans have historically always had a very strong foundation in doctrine, because what has united us, because we haven't been like, we haven't been the Roman Catholics who have the Pope, and kind of as long as you are underneath the Pope, you can color outside the lines a bit, as long as you start coloring back inside the lines with if the Pope tells you to. So there's no Pope of Lutheranism. There's no central governing body of the Lutheran confession. And we're not like the Anglican Communion, where we're basically united by the Book of Common Prayer, by essentially a common liturgy. What's always united Lutherans has been our confession of faith, our doctrine. And one of the things that's odd to me as a Lutheran about that is that oftentimes we get accused of being arrogant a lot, because for a number of reasons. One, because we talk theology a lot, and people will say, this is what we believe, and then people go, oh, I don't believe that, I believe this thing, and we go, oh, well, you're wrong, and here's why you're wrong, and they go, oh, that's arrogant of you to believe that you're right. Or historically, Lutherans have practiced what's called closed communion, which is the idea that we believe that the Scriptures require us to be of the same mind and judgment, to use Paul's language from 1 Corinthians, concerning the gospel and the sacraments, to take the Lord's Supper together. So if a Roman Catholic comes to my church and says, I'd like to take communion, I would say, well, in order for you to take communion, you'd need to go through instruction in what we believe. If you believe that as well, you would need to leave the Catholic Church, join the Lutheran Church, and then you can commune with us. Catholics usually don't have a problem with that, because they have the same practice, and the Pope doesn't want them to commune with us. So, but in the Protestant world, you'll get a lot of people who will get very offended by that, and who will say, well, that's arrogant that you guys think that only Lutherans should be able to commune with you. And I can understand from their perspective, if you believe that the Lord's Supper is just a way for people to demonstrate their faith, that it's basically just a symbolic meal through which, by partaking in it, we announce to the world that we are Christians and our desire to live in Christian harmony with each other. If that's what the Lord's Supper is, if it's just a symbol, then yeah, of course it would be arrogant for us to say, hey, here comes the time of the service where we're going to all say that we love Jesus. And then a Presbyterian walks up and they go, not so fast, buddy. you don't get to come up here like we do, right? If that's what the Lord's Supper were, I would agree that that's an unloving practice and an unfaithful thing. But we believe in the Lord's Supper, we receive the body and blood of Jesus. We believe St. Paul tells us that those who partake of the Lord's Supper without discerning the body and blood of Jesus can eat and drink to their judgment. So we see the Lord's Supper as medicine that you need to be properly prepared to receive, otherwise it can hurt you. So it's out of love and a desire to put away our divisions and to ensure that everyone who's partaking of this sacred gift is receiving it rightly. So nevertheless, that's our practice. And one of the things that is always just kind of been odd to me as a Lutheran is people will say, well, it's schismatic or sectarian that you guys won't let any Christian commune with you. And to me, this weird schismatic sectarian thing is, if you're able to commune with someone, then you should be one church body with them. If your divisions are not so great as to prevent you from communing together and worshiping together, then you shouldn't be separate church bodies. You should be one church body. So the only reason to have division is if some of you are right and some of you are wrong, and that you're following God's command, that you iron out your theological differences before you come together. And so to me, whenever people say like, oh, you Lutherans just think you're right all the time, my response is, well, what does your church body think? Like, are you your own church body for a reason other than thinking that you're right? And if so, what are you doing? Well, it's like when, I don't know if you've ever had anyone say this to you. I've had a few people say this to me, where they'll go, oh yeah, this guy will say like, oh, my wife and I, we got divorced, but don't worry, we're still like best friends. And I go, that's worse. That's that's so
why?
much
Why
worse.
did you even?
Why, right? If you can stand to be in the same, I get it. Like if you meet a couple and you go, "Why are you divorced?" And they go, "Oh, we did things that were so awful to each other that one of us will literally be killed if we're in the same room together." You'd go, "Oh, that I mean that I'm sorry, that shouldn't be the case, but I get it." Right? But if they're
Yeah.
like, "So we're gonna go to the movies today, and we're gonna go take the kids to Six Flags, and get them ice cream and hug each other and talk about how great our lives are, and then we're gonna go home to our separate spouses," and you go, "No, that's like infinitely worse." So, so the only reason that a church body should exist, as far as I am concerned as a Lutheran, is because you think you're right, because you believe that your doctrine is correct, and 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 therefore the only way to achieve any real unity in the church is then to say, because if the Pope woke up tomorrow and he said, "You know what, guys, I think this Lutheranism thing is where it's at," right? And if he read the Book of Concord and he was like, "Hey, Lutherans, let's sit down and talk," and if somehow by the grace of God we were able to find unity again, that would be the greatest thing in the entire world. But you can't find unity if the thing that separates you, so the thing that unites the church is a common confession of Christ, because a common confession yields a common love. And if you don't have a common confession, then you can't have unity. But if what divides you is something other than a common confession, well, then that can't be solved by the word of God. So it's an impossible division. I mean, it can be obviously in the sense of God calling you to repentance and healing your hearts. But if the reason, so for like, all right, I'm fascinated by church websites. I love looking at church websites because church websites are essentially a 45-second sales pitch for why you should go to someone's church. And I think that's how people should embrace their websites. I think they should recognize that's what it is. It's a commercial. So what you lead with indicates what you actually think the church is. It's a very revealing thing in terms of people will tell you what they think the church is, but what do they really think the church is, right? So most people, if you ask them what the church is, most Christians will give you an answer that is relatively within the same ballpark, right? It is the body of believers gathered around Jesus through faith in some way. Most people. So Lutherans we talk about where you find the pure preaching of the word and the right administration of the sacraments. That's where the church gathers. But the church is believers gathered around Christ, right? So we all know what the right answer is supposed to be. But when you look at so many church websites, that's when you see what people really think the church is. So, when you go to a church website and they go, "We're the church that's going to teach you how to lead a dynamic, purpose-filled life to improve your this and your that and your and all of that," is that their confession is the church is people gathered at the feet of the guru who's going to teach you how to live a life that's pleasing to Jesus, which I think is off kilter for how the church should properly be understood, which is the church is the saints gathered around the gifts of forgiveness and salvation. So my point in this is that when you look at a lot of church websites, the impression you get from various church websites is the reason you should join our church is because we're more effective. We're better. So we are so you've had these other churches that have promised that they were going to transform your life. It didn't work. We're the one that's going to do it. That's how they're marketing themselves. And that to me is 80 trillion times more arrogant than my Lutheran church or the local Roman Catholic church or the hard-nosed, one of those kind of weirdo those fundamentalist churches that'll have names like True Bible church, and you're going, there's a story behind that name. Like there's another church in town that you don't think is firmly committed to the Bible, and I bet you split off from that church, right? But like all those churches that are go, we're right, we're the ones who have the right answers, we're the church you should go to. Well, that may strike people as arrogant, but we're not saying we're better. I would never in a million years ever say that Lutherans are better Christians, that we're better at praying, that we're better at loving our neighbors, that we're better at obeying the commandments, that we're better at trusting in God's promises without fear. So a church that says we're going to do the job, we're going to do a better job of transforming your spiritual life. That to me is 80, as I said, 80 trillion times more arrogant than just saying, well, here are these various questions that people have about the Bible. This is what we say the answers are. We believe that we're correct. That's why we think you should come here. It's because we have the right answers.
Right, and to me, it's just like, what else would you say? The whole point of having a position and trying to tell somebody about something is because you believe it's right. I have
Right.
things that I believe are right. I have things that I believe are wrong, and there are things in the middle somewhere that I don't know about, and
Yeah.
I try to just weave my way through them as best as I can.
Well, just become a Lutheran, and that list of things you don't know about will shrink. It will get
And
much smaller.
that's some of the things, and like again, I've been this way all my life, so I don't know. I don't know. I would love to go to. I saw. I meant Christian Mario. I think it was. No, it wasn't him. It was somebody. It was Martin Luther on Twitter. He said, "I'd like to make it a life goal, eventually go to every denominational church and just experience it." And I was like, I'm kind of in a similar spot where I'd love to sit down and just see where all the differences are, because
Mm.
the church I go to now is not all that different from the church I grew up with. And then in the fact that um, you go to I go to church with a lot of people, and we've got that the fundamentals are there. Jesus Christ, or we believe in God, right, and the things in the Old Testament, and then Jesus Christ is God sent to the earth, lived a perfect life, showed us what a perfect life looks like, gave us all sorts of great instructions, and then died for all of our stupidity and earthly sins, and then resurrected 3 days later, taught us some more stuff, and then ascended, and he's coming back one day, right? And then Paul writes letters and that kind of help do that, try to put that church instruction there. But the basis is it's usually it's there, right? And if it's not, I don't really talk to people at my church who do that, who believe outside of that. But you have a lot of different perspectives that you could almost categorize in some of the reformed ideas and some of the things that Catholics believe or whatnot. But it's not, they don't. We don't believe in a pope, or the idea that that's something that we should look towards, and certainly the current pope is not is not engendering any confidence that
Right.
that we should anybody should be converting to Catholicism. But that's one of the things I've enjoyed, is that there are differences in some perspectives, but the fundamentals are there, and I feel like we should, you know, I just got onto Twitter in November to start giving a different point of exposure for this channel, and you were one of the first people I followed, and most of the people you followed are Lutherans, right? And I figured out that there's a buffalo. I don't know what it means, but that generally means it's a Lutheran.
Yeah, I can give you the story on that real quick. So, a buddy of mine named Chris Jackson, who's no longer on Twitter, but he had this long running joke on Twitter about how he wanted to start a Lutheran. I don't know how to say the word khanate. So whatever the term was for Genghis Khan's
Okay, yeah,
khanate.
I think that's
Khanate. And so he wanted to start one in the Great Plains of America. And the symbol of the Lutheran Khanate would be the buffalo. So at one point, a few Lutherans started putting buffaloes in their avatar. So that oddly somehow became the symbol of Lutheran Twitter. And
I
then
like it.
there was a guy on Twitter a little bit ago. I saw he had one, and I didn't know who he was. But I knew people that he was friends with in real life. And so he had one in there, and I messaged him. I was like, "Dude, what's up with this? Are you a Lutheran?" And he said, "No. Why do you ask?" And I explained the thing to him, and he said, "Oh, no, I'm not a Lutheran, but I was baptized Lutheran." And I thought that's the worst ending to this story that I could have
I'm
possibly
not
had.
Lutheran
I
anymore.
I thought you had just become a Lutheran and had gotten excited about this, but it was some other reason that he had done it. But the ending to the story was I used to be a Lutheran, but I'm not anymore. That wasn't how I wanted that to go. Stinks.
Yeah, and so I noticed that, and I think that's really cool because again, it's easy to identify too. I think it's cool that there's kind of a thing going on there.
That,
But
by the way, reminds me of one of the most annoying things that happens to me is as a Lutheran pastor is I'll be out and about in my a lot of times I'll wear a clerical collar and sort of the pastor uniform. And so every now and then I'll be talking to folks and they'll say, "Oh, are you a Catholic priest?" And I say, "No, I'm even better. I'm a Lutheran pastor." And then they say, "Oh, I grew up Lutheran." And I think, why are you telling me this? Because the subsequent sentence to "I grew up Lutheran" is never, "and then I have remained Lutheran." No one says "I grew up Lutheran" who is still currently Lutheran. So they go, "Oh, the thing that you are that you think is the best and that you think everyone should be. I used to be that, but then I stopped being it. Isn't that wonderful?" And you're going, I don't like this story.
do you
It
tell them
makes
that, or
me
does the smile just get
no,
very
I'm
awkward
too.
looking?
I'm too. I joke around like this, in the proper circumstances, but I'm generally too Midwestern and just too polite to just go, "Why are you telling me this? You're ruining my day by telling me that you used to be." It's like, did you ever have when you were growing up? You know how like you couldn't. I'm not talking about you personally, but maybe this was the case with you. Like so, like I'd go long stretches where I couldn't get a girlfriend, and then I'd get a girlfriend, and then some other girl would come up to me and she'd be like, "I used to have the biggest crush on you," and you're going, "What? What am I supposed to do with that information now? It's worthless to me, and all it does is make me sad." So that's the church version of that. Is a lady coming up
Yeah.
and going, "Oh, I used to be Lutheran. I loved the Lutheran church that I used to go to."
Have
Oh,
you considered
thanks.
returning?
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's just the worst.
You're like, well, we miss you.
Yeah,
We miss you. We would love to have you back.
yeah. I could say that, but I just go, "Oh, okay," and then I feel sad for the rest of the day.
I can't remember exactly where I was going with it, but
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you to
that's
tell a
okay. That's
story
fine.
about myself. That was rude.
But that's and so this so to somehow turn this back towards humor, even though we're making a few funny comments here and there, but um, this is something that I struggle with because I am very kind of like what you said about you like things to be wholesome, you like things to be clean, and of course
Yeah,
I spent some time in the military, which
he's
kind
not
of
that. Yeah.
tarnished that wholesomeness, and there's a lot of gallows humor now
Mm.
mixed in with it, but um, but I do like wholesomeness. I like justice. It's one of the things that I love that I lean against in the faith in God is that He understands it, and eventually, even if I don't see it here on this earth, that there will be justice or I'll learn that maybe the justice wasn't what that I was seeking wasn't really appropriate. But the part that I struggle with so much is when I see something, and Christian Twitter is what it is, but I see so many people, coming down on other people in a way that isn't helpful, isn't constructive, and immediately what I want to do is like, hey, knock it off. And while the way I'm going to knock that off is I'm going to be just as rude
Yeah.
and condescending and snarky and
Right.
sarcastic, or more so, than you were being to that other person. But I'm not doing it because I don't like you. I'm not doing it to knock you down. But at the same time, I walk away from it oftentimes feeling it's like I should have done this better. I could have done this better. And while it's like, oh yeah, look at how smart I am for punching you up on this. At the end of the day, I'm just as I feel just as bad as the person I was accusing of being not helpful.
Yeah, social media is a challenge. because not everyone approaches it the same way. And a really interesting thing to me about social media is that somehow every different social media company or platform somehow developed its own culture with its own kind of unspoken rules that we all sort of recognize. Um, so, for example, if I get on Twitter and I tweet something um, about politics, if I just if I say, like, I was thinking today that Vladimir Putin is like what happens if an inferiority complex and a Bond henchman had a baby. Um, and so if I tweet something like that on Twitter, um, kind of the rules of Twitter are that if you people may quote tweet something to go, oh, I don't agree with this, right? But even though everyone can see it, not everyone feel. I think because everyone can see it, it doesn't. People don't actually feel like they're having a conversation with you, right? So so if Elon Musk tweets something, I don't feel like he's talking to me. He's just speaking into the ether. But on Facebook, I think because most people's accounts are set up to be more private-ish, where you can only see someone's Facebook posts if you're friends with them. It feels more to people like it's a conversation, which is why I hate Facebook. Because to me, social media is me just vomiting whatever popped into my head into the ether, and then and then when other people are like, no, I want to have a conversation about the thing that you said. I feel entitled to a response, right? Like people will say that on Facebook. Why aren't you responding to the comment that I made? And they don't say that on Twitter because people just kind of recognize it's a different thing.
They're
So
scrolling elsewhere now.
yeah, and it's like sociologically, it's just really fascinating to me how no one ever said those were the rules, but that just came to be the way that people understand things. So that's why I like Twitter more than I like Facebook. I'll give an example of something. So a little while ago, there was there it's kind of a boring background story, but there's a software called Lutheran Service Builder that my church body has for that can help. It's a digitized version of our hymnal essentially, and so it gives you lots of options for doing either PowerPoint presentations of services, or if you're just printing special services where that it might be a little bit complicated for people to use the hymnal and stuff like that. So there was something I was trying to take from the pastor's altar book that's typically up on the altar, and I was trying to get something from there, seeing if there was a digital version of it. And so I said online, hey, does anyone know if there is a digital version of this thing that I want? And on Facebook, someone's response was, why not try making a photocopy? And I just thought, like,
That's a boomer response.
Right, that wouldn't happen on Twitter, because on Twitter people would just go, I don't have the answer to that question, so he's not talking to me. And so then, like, I'm having to deal with the thing where you're trying to be nice, but at the same time you're going, because that's not the thing that I want to do. I know how to make a photocopy. I know how to do the thing that's not the thing that I want to do. I want to be able to do the thing that I want to do. It's like, how do I, again, going back to, like, if you're in middle school and you're like, how do I get Kelly to like me? And someone's like, well, why don't you just ask out Sarah? And you're like, that's not the thing that I want to do. So social media is weird that way, and it's different on every platform. And I think you can be tougher with people on Twitter than you can on Facebook.
Man, it's harsh.
And likewise, so the way I'll talk with people, I don't ever try to be rude. The only times I'm ever pretty curt with people are if I feel like someone's arguing in bad faith. But if people email me, I'm very diplomatic and patient in my responses, because that's talking to a real person. Whereas,
what about if David French emailed you?
If David French emailed me,
yeah,
look, I would be no, I would be. I've met him before. We got along fine.
Okay.
But that was a few years ago, so it was kind of before the turn that he's taken. But my experience with talking with him in person was certainly that he was a thoughtful guy. So yeah, I would be entirely willing to have a conversation with him, despite the fact that I just think, all right, Twitter is basically, if for anyone who watches pro wrestling, Twitter is when you have the gimmick on, right? So, so if you watch pro wrestling back in the day, um, you'd have Ted DiBiase, the $1 million man, right? And he's the smug rich guy who's always cheating in his matches, and he's going out and he's buying people off and he's paying people money to kiss his feet, right? But it's a gimmick, it's his act. Ted DiBiase would go home and then he would not be that guy. He would be a normal person who played with his kids and things of that nature. And Twitter is kind of Twitter's like pro wrestling. It's where you kind of have a gimmick, and this is the thing that I do, and this is kind of the way that I talk on this platform, and so it's not real to me. So I don't always have as much of a problem with people being a little bit feisty on Twitter. I don't like anonymous accounts. I don't. I think people should have the strength to stand up to stand behind what it is that they're saying. I mean, I recognize that there are folks who, you work at a corporate place where you'll genuinely get fired by your human resources team if you express a view on human gender that the vast majority of people in the world hold today, and that literally everybody held 5 seconds ago. So
Right.
I recognize that level of complication, but Twitter is, and even in Christian Twitter, there's obviously psychos there, but a lot of what I see is I just don't take that. I mean, I take people's faith seriously. I take the fact that they actually believe this stuff seriously. But the way that people will discuss things, to me, is it's pro wrestling. It's so some guy he's got a picture of a saint, with like I don't watch Star Trek, the Borg guys who
Oh
have
yeah,
like
the board.
right.
Right.
So like if a guy has a saint who's half Borg or something like that, um, it's pro wrestling. This is his gimmick, and I don't think people should take things super personally if things get kind of heated or snarky.
Yeah. And I mean, I take things personally for myself because I always go, that's my problem.
Yeah.
Where's that line where um, you're being you're standing up for your faith or standing up for a fellow Christian, and between there and hey, um, you're 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 not being a good witness. You're not being a good example
Right.
because you're really just attacking a person at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the general rule of these things should be, and I talked about this in the video that you were talking about before. I think some kind of general rules for snarky Christian dialogue are, one, that you should always attack ideas and not people. I mean, there are some exceptions to that, obviously, when the people themselves are so intertwined in the idea that they can't really be separated from them. So I like with Kenneth Copeland, I have, from the video, I mean, I clearly have zero problem making fun of the way that Kenneth Copeland looks because he's clearly demon possessed.
I was about to say, not a real person.
Right, right. But that's all tied up with him, right? And I'll make fun of Pope Francis as a person, but even like Pope Francis, I wouldn't make fun of the way that he looks. Um,
Right.
so, um, you're generally going after the idea rather than the person. I'll make fun of Joel Osteen's teeth, and his pearly white teeth because I don't know, it just seems fair.
His congregation paid for him, so
right, yeah, yeah. So, and Donny Osmond has the same teeth. So there's something about heresy that just really makes those puppies shine. But so that you're attacking ideas rather than people. and as a general rule, and as a general rule, also you should recognize that theological discourse is oftentimes like a boxing match. And if a guy gets into the ring with you, it's fair to punch him in the mouth.
Mhm.
But you don't go around punching people who haven't stepped into the ring. So, um, so if I have so if I'm on social media and I write, "Hey, I'm so excited! I'm going to church today to baptizing a little baby today, right?" And some Baptist guy gets on my wall and says, "Hey, why are you baptizing babies?" Right? Then I'll go, "Okay, this was my post. I wasn't going after him. He stepped into the ring. I will engage with his ideas, right?" But if I have a Baptist friend who posts a picture of his son being baptized, 2 weeks after his seventh birthday or whatever, I'm not going to go onto his page at that point and pick a fight with him about the fact that he should have baptized his son when he was an infant, because the guy hasn't stepped into the ring with me, so to
Right.
speak. And generally, as a rule, and again, this is a little bit different. This can be different with social media, but by and large, lay people, if they're not putting themselves forward as teachers, have not stepped into the ring. So, like, I'll make fun of Joel Osteen, but I won't make fun of people who read his books, because they don't. Mockery helps to tear down the facade, or the veneer of what he purports himself to be. But the
You can
person who
tear down the book. You might be like, "Oh
right, you
yeah,
can
well
tear
you're
down the
quoting a
book,
book, but
right.
this is all the problems with it."
Right, but I'm not going to. I'll speak about kind of what I think are the spiritual reasons for why people might be inclined to embrace that stuff. Like going back to the Kenneth Copeland video before, where I talk in the video about the video was still, it was a criticism of the fact that there are so many people who buy into this, but I wasn't making fun of them. It was rather trying to, even from a kind of evangelism standpoint for folks of that nature, trying to show, all right, the reason you think this is going to solve your problems, the reason you're throwing money at Kenneth Copeland is because you don't actually trust in the sufficiency of Christ's death for you. That you are so afraid that you are distant from God, that you're trying to kind of grab onto the coattails of someone who's convincing you that he actually has sort of the power of God coursing through his veins. And so that's the idea I'm trying to unpack. But I'm not going after the people who have been fooled by that. So, and you see this a lot in the Gospels, where Jesus is always incredibly patient with the people who have been mistaught and misled. So the people who come to him and don't understand the gospel because they've been misled by the Pharisees, he's always patient with them, but he's brutally direct and harsh with the Pharisees and the chief priests and the scribes, because they should know better. These were the guys who were supposed to recognize him. These were the ones who were supposed to see that he was the fulfillment of all of these biblical promises, and yet they threw all of that aside for this false religion that they had propped up to glorify themselves. So they've stepped into the ring. They're the ones who are preventing God's people from recognizing his promises. So they're fair game. They're fair game to mock. So I think there's a pretty clear, and you see the same thing too, like with the, Elijah and the prophets of Baal, right? So where they have the sacrifice off, and Elijah, so they're trying to light their sacrifice and it won't light, and Elijah says to them essentially, "Oh, maybe is it because your God's too busy taking a poop? Is that why? He's not answering your prayers, because he's off going to the bathroom?" And so he mocks them because they're setting themselves up to be religious leaders. But when he comes across uh, people who are in need of comfort and mercy, that he doesn't that those are not his enemies. Those are not people that need to be torn down. They're people that need to be comforted. So that's, I think, is generally the biblical model. And no, I mean, we're all sinners, and we're all fallen, which means that and we can't see into people's hearts. So that means that there are times when you may go easy on someone that you should perhaps be a bit more direct with. And there are also times when you may be harsher with people than you should have been. And one of the things as a parish pastor that I have generally found to be the case in the vast majority of instances is that whenever people are being irrational, or just kind of where their level of anger doesn't match the what's actually going on, it's almost always because they're coming from a place of hurt. And so so there have been plenty of times I've been arguing a theological point with someone, and then that person will say something that makes it pretty clear to me this person's arguing from a position of pain, and this is not really a theological issue. This is so it'd be like for a very common example of this is, say, the issue of abortion, where if I'm talking about just articulating a classic Christian view of the right to life, and if I'm talking to some lady and she starts getting really upset and says something that so if she says, I just think you Christians you're constantly trying to make people feel bad about things that they've already felt bad enough about. Right? In that moment, I'm going to go, okay, I think I know what's going on here. I think the issue is that you or someone that you are very close to had an abortion. And this is not a matter of principle for you, but this is a matter of self-preservation. You're trying to protect yourself. And in instances like that, snark is the worst possible medicine to apply. But when you have people arguing in bad faith, and when you just have people when they are really keyed on the actual arguments themselves, I find that it can be really helpful. I did a video back in the early days when I used to use this software where it was text to talk, so it was robo voice kind of characters. I did a video basically explaining the Lutheran position on baptism and the way that we approach the various biblical texts that deal with baptism. And the argument, so the gist of the video was, it was Paul talking to, I think, Mark, and Mark was Mark was saying to Paul, hey, you know how it is that baptism is just a symbol and it doesn't really do anything? And Paul goes, yeah. And he goes, oh, everyone's getting the wrong idea. And he goes, well, Paul goes, well, why would they do that? And and Mark would go, well, because this you know how in Romans 6 when you said that baptism makes us dead to sin and alive to Christ? And Paul goes, yeah. And he goes, yeah, that you said that baptism is the way that we're actually tied to the death and resurrection, that it doesn't represent salvation, but it actually accomplishes it. So it was them going through every passage and Paul realizing he accidentally said the opposite of what he meant every time he had talked about it. So that was a video intended for people who are really kind of locked in on the theology of it, and to say, they go, I don't understand why you Lutherans teach this. And it was my way of showing from a kind of backwards way, every text in the Bible that describes what baptism is and what it does, they all describe it as God's work for us and in us, rather than describing it as our work for God. So the video, I hope, works in a situation like that, where someone can watch that and get a really quick, clear, concise view of how Lutherans view the issue. But it's obviously not something that would work, if I'm talking to a lady who had a child die before she was able to have her child baptized, and so she's so overcome with grief that she doesn't want to believe that that infants should be baptized. In an instance like that, obviously it's not going to work, and that's not who it's designed for. And it's, I wouldn't throw that in the comments to her, in a situation like that. So
don't send a Presbyterian to her either.
Yeah. Well, yeah, don't send a Presbyterian to anyone. Um, no, that's. But
And I'm like,
there are some all right Presbyterians. I got some that I like. Some nice,
it's probably
thoughtful
three.
chaps. But they're easy to make fun of just because their name is funny. I mean that a
Yeah.
Presbyterian is has got to be of like the standard denomination names. It's a funny. I mean, Lutheran itself is pretty funny too. You can just like,
A Presbyterian sounds just generic, right?
it sounds dispassionate
Methodist,
and
maybe.
boring.
Episcopalian can't work because
No,
it's just too
Episcopalian. Yeah,
weird.
I mean, it's a kind of a funny sounding word, but it doesn't. But yeah, sometimes when you're making jokes, it's just the sound of the word that like there's the show Parks and Recreation had a Lutheran joke where there's this councilman in the town who's constantly having affairs and he's trying to seduce Leslie Knope. And he looks at her and he says, something like you're like a glass of, you are so pure, you're like a glass of milk. You must be Lutheran. Are you a Lutheran?" And the thing is though is that like I don't know that necessarily even is sort of an accurate, like if you were to pick what denomination do you typically think of if you think of someone who's just pure and uncorrupted. I don't know that Lutheran is actually the answer to that question. I think it's more so just it. It was a funny.
It sounded good in the
It
joke.
sounded funnier than "Are you a Presbyterian?" Right? Because that's not what Presbyterian sounds like, and it also probably was going back to a lot of the old like Garrison Keillor jokes from the Prairie Home Companion, where he would do his awful Lutheran jokes.
Yeah.
Don't get me started about Garrison Keillor.
We talked about that briefly, and that was the thing. But my influence on, and that maybe that's part of the reason why when my dad told me this was important to read, was part of the Lutheran backdrop of all that. Not that he doesn't have a problem with them or anything. At least it didn't. When he said I was baptized Lutheran, that's what his dad was. But then his dad died, and his mom
Okay.
went for and then um whatever happened, but he didn't was like, oh, I couldn't stand it or whatever. But, it was just, that was one of the touchstones and he's listening to it where he's reading a book and he wants his son to kind of understand kind of where he comes from on a lot of things. And so I thought that, that was my instinct. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's Lutheranism. When I think of it as like kind of something I could identify well with, as in, kind of a community, a small community type of thing where everybody's part of this church, and I have a lot of I think all Protestants should have a lot of respect for the Lutheran Church, specifically because we're Protestant.
You should respect us so much that you become Lutheran. That's
Become
the
Lutheran.
only. That's really the level of respect that the Protestant world owes us. Is
The
to
only
just-
appropriate amount of
It's the
respect.
only appropriate way. Everything else would be
and,
insufficient.
and I think that, I think it's a great. To me, it's like with the good discourse with that is kind of like how we in the military, the Navy guys make fun of the Marines, who make fun of the Air
Right.
Force, who make fun of the Army, who make fun of the Navy, and everybody makes fun of the Coast Guard.
Right.
So there it is.
Yeah. That's the way to go. Yeah, I think there is there's a tricky balance to find. Like one of the things I'm not crazy about is when people will say like, oh, all these Christian denominations sort of razz each other, but in the end, we're all Christians. Now, there's of course a sense in which that's true, right? And so, in the sense that, if there's a group of Baptists in some foreign country that are being persecuted because of Christ, I know that the reason they're being persecuted is not because they don't believe in baptismal regeneration. It's because they believe in Jesus. So in that sense, certainly I've got their back, right? And we should support and encourage them. But what I am not crazy about is when people will kind of speak that way as though, oh, our differences don't matter, because they definitely do. And if God has said something, we should believe it. And if God has, like, so again on the issue of baptism, either God wants you to baptize babies or He doesn't. There's no we shouldn't be so postmodern that we say, well, God will be pleased with us either way as long as we're sort of sincere in our beliefs about it. He either told us to or he told us not to. So we should. That is an important difference that we should try to iron out. And one of those teachings is false. Yeah, I mean, so either that we should baptize babies or that we shouldn't.
Right.
One of those is false. So we should, in order to prevent a little leaven from leavening the whole lump, we should seek to answer that question. But at the same time, certainly we should recognize that that there are ways in which we, despite our differences, we certainly do need each other. And this is something I think about oftentimes with the Catholic Church. Is like I'm not going to like any pope, because any pope that there is, barring a miracle, is going to deny the doctrine of justification through faith alone, which, as a Lutheran, I am convinced is the core article, is the central chief article of the Church. So there's never going to be a pope that I think is great theologically, but there are popes who can be worse than other popes, as we've seen in the last couple. Right. So I would definitely prefer Benedict over Francis, even as a guy who's not a Catholic, because I recognize that there are plenty of areas where if the Catholic Church falls on that point, that will have huge ramifications and cause huge problems, not only in the world, but also in other denominations and in other religious communities as well. Right. So if the Catholic Church were to cave on, say, the issue of gay marriage, well, on the one hand, I don't need the Catholic Church to uphold a proper understanding of human sexuality in order for me to know what it is. I don't need the Pope to articulate it for me. I have the scriptures. I can articulate it from them. But if 1 billion people are given license to reject something that's profoundly and deeply scriptural, that obviously will have incredibly negative effects for the rest of people who are trying to hold to that. Not only in our own church bodies and in the beliefs of the people in our church bodies, but also in terms of, just imagine what that would do for religious freedom issues. So if the Pope all of a sudden came out tomorrow and said, guys, gay marriage is great, all of these, how for the part of our culture that has been gunning to take away the tax exempt status of churches that are on supposedly the wrong side of the culture war issues, well, that would do huge damage, massive damage to that cause, because that's the way that the left understands religious freedom. Is like, well, you go, oh, I can't do that. I can't make a cake for your gay wedding because it violates my religion. And the left goes, well, but it doesn't violate the Episcopalians' religion. You could be that, and you're going, right. Religious freedom means freedom to follow my religion, not freedom to follow your religion. Just right. Because something is not against your religion doesn't mean it's not against mine. So I think there's definitely a sense in which we do obviously need each other. We also need to be seeking to put away our sad divisions, and we should always be striving to that. And we shouldn't, and we should definitely take a look at history and recognize that division in a divided church has a much harder time standing up against persecution. It's the history of the expansion of Islam, is that Christianity was divided and couldn't get its act together to actually be able to ward off the military advance of Islam. So you got what you now have in the Middle East and throughout the Islamic world. So that's why we should be striving for theological unity, and the way that we do that is by talking and fighting and arguing and occasionally making fun of each other. So it's a nuanced thing as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and like I said, there's parts where it's constructive, and and like you said, with the Catholic Church especially, it's like they've got such a footprint on Christianity. Right. In the Christian world, that you if they start teaching the wrong thing, then how far? I mean, you're not just worried about the people in my congregation or the people in my denomination, but now I worry about people who could be righteous and are now being told something that is not that is decidedly, unarguably wrong,
Mhm.
and they're thinking it's right. So they're just blindly going into this because somebody told them that it's okay, that the Bible doesn't really mean what it says it
Right.
means. It means what you feel like it means. And so
Mhm.
if it's okay with you, then I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to tell you that something is wrong. You
You
might
know,
need to fix it. I'm not here to
you know
say
what's
that you're
weird to me about that phrase? I was just talking to someone about this the other day. Is that it's one of the most transparently false things that people say when they say I'm not judging, because you think about the times in which people say it, right? So like, let's say someone's at work and a guy walks in, a guy who'd been named Peter the name before, and then the next day he comes in wearing a dress and his name is Virginia, and he says, I just want you to know that I've transitioned to female and I go by Virginia now, and I would like for you to refer to me as Virginia, and we use feminine pronouns. And his coworker looks at him and says, I just want you to know that I don't judge you at all. Right? So that's purported to be, I'm not judging you. All right. Well, let's take that into another context. Let's say your coworker shows up one day and he goes, the best news. My wife and I just adopted a baby. We've been waiting so long, and then it finally came through. We finally were able to adopt this little girl. And your coworker looks at you and says, I don't judge. Right? And you would go, what the heck? Why would you say that? Like, that clearly means that you think I've done something wrong.
right.
You saying I'm not gonna. It's like someone saying I'm not gonna hold that against you, right? Well, that's what it means when someone says, "Well, I don't judge." What that means is you recognize that there is something to judge and that you would be right to judge it, but in your infinite mercy, you are refraining from doing so. So it's so there's nothing that's actually sincere about it. If you say to someone, "Oh, I don't judge,"
100% conceit.
then it's 100% acknowledging that you're judging. So it's like the best of both worlds. It's you get to judge someone, but you also get the righteousness of being someone who is too merciful and kind and loving to judge, right? So like the people who used to say like, "Oh, I don't see color." I remember stumbling across a conversation between two professors when I was in college. I was walking down the hallway, and this one lady goes, "Oh, is he black? I didn't even notice. I don't notice color." And you go, "Yeah, you do.
Or
You
you wouldn't have
you
said it.
you know right. You notice when you look at people, you notice what they look like. You notice the color of if you know the like, oh, that guy who was wearing red shoes and a white shirt and blue jeans. Oh, I don't notice color. I didn't notice the color of his skin. I just noticed the color of everything else, everything that he was wearing and around him. It's just the
It was
most obviously false thing, but it's a false thing that you say to so that puts you in the position of being above all of that, and so that anyone
yeah.
who would question it. But yeah, no one ever says, "Oh, I don't judge," in situations where people legitimately don't make a negative moral judgment on things.
Yeah.
You don't like if your friend comes over like, this is like the coolest thing. My son was the high school valedictorian. Oh, I don't judge. I
Yeah.
like
Nerd.
you would right. You would never say that. You'd say, "Oh, that's great. That's awesome and fantastic." So it's
At
all
the
fake.
same time, it's just like when you're confronted with Virginia now, who was
Mm,
Phil 24 hours ago, and you can't, I can't bring. Oh, I'm so happy for you. I'm not happy for you.
right.
Like, oh, I'm sad. I'm genuinely sad. I'm sad. I'm
Yeah.
disappointed. And not necessarily, maybe not for that end, because I think that that's more
Right.
of a mental illness issue. That,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I try. But
it
or
would be
like, oh man, I went out and I partied hard and I had all this promiscuous activity
right.
that night and it was great. And I was like, I'm not happy for you. What you
Yeah.
did was irresponsible and reckless and you've you've hurt yourself.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
I'm
think
judging your actions.
yeah, I think that the difficult thing is, and this is probably because of the like every region of the country has some level of major influence on something, right? And so and a lot of the way that we converse is I think is governed by Midwestern politeness. Right. So a lot of our culture is like we picked up the total narcissism of Hollywood and the neurosis and high stress of the East Coast living. But then the way we converse is largely is governed by kind of Midwestern habits of niceness. And the problem is that there are a lot of things that you say that are not sincere, but it's just a polite way to get yourself out of a conversation, right? So the Midwestern thing is like the middle-aged or older Midwestern thing is, oh, that's nice. That's the thing that you say when someone tells you something that's not interesting or that you're not super crazy about, So they go, oh yeah, my cousin my cousin Peter just got married for the third time, and you go, oh, that's nice, right? And you don't really mean it. It's just like that saying that's not that's nice is how it ends the conversation. Whereas if you say, I think that your cousin Peter is probably an unrepentant sinner and needs to turn to Christ, right? That's not the end of the converse. That's the beginning of a much longer and more uncomfortable conversation. Or the younger version of it is, man, that's crazy. Right. So someone comes up to you and starts a story and, oh, that's crazy means I am acknowledging that this matters to you. It does not matter to me. Please, having paid you my respects, please let me now leave the conversation. So the problem is we don't have any terminology for I disagree with your philosophical presuppositions about yourself and your life, and I disagree with morally with the decisions that you have made, but I still love you as a person, and in fact it's because I love you as a person that I disagree with these things. There's not a concise like 3 or 4 word phrase to say that, and it would be nice if it would be nice if that were a thing that existed, so that in an instance like that, so whatever the guy's name was, Phil or Peter or whatever, comes in one day and he goes, I'm Virginia now, and you could just say 1 2 3 4, whatever the few
magic
short
word
phrase, whatever the magical phrase is, where you're just saying, I'm acknowledging what you have said to me. I do not accept your philosophical presuppositions. There's a video I watched a little bit ago it was an interview with the cast and then Quentin Tarantino, the cast of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And a lady got up and asked a question about Margot Robbie's role in the movie where she plays Sharon Tate, and she hardly has any lines in the movie. Now, when you watch the movie, it's very obvious why that is, and I'll kind of let people draw their own conclusions on that if they've seen that. But it was very obvious to me that it was not it wasn't fetishizing whatever that word is, her character Sharon Tate, and it wasn't remotely out of misogyny. It was out of deep and profound affection for this woman, this real person who was brutally murdered. That came from. But so this lady gets up and she asks Quentin Tarantino, blah 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 blah, women. Your movies aren't paying enough respect to women, which is like insane if you've seen a number of his movies, for all of the moral qualms that we can raise about them. The idea that he doesn't write meaningful female characters is absurd. But so the lady rambles, blah, 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 blah. You don't have enough roles for women. She doesn't have enough lines, blah, 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 blah. And he looks at her and he just says, I reject your hypothesis. And that was it. And
it's like the
and
thumb. It's to me, it's just like the internet text version of the thumbs up. It's just like
right.
okay,
Yeah,
that's the
but
end.
it was just a very concise way to say your accusation brought with it a whole host of presuppositions that I do not share. So your overarching philosophical presupposition that has caused you to say all of this, I don't share it. And the only way I can respond to you is to say I reject your hypothesis. I reject the central claim at hand here. And I wonder if there's a way for if we could just sort of use that with a lot of this stuff where someone comes to you and they say that and you just say I love you and I reject your hypothesis. And
I
that
think it's
you know
I
and that's
think
about all you can do.
we've gotten to the point because we've grown from the and I guess in Christians know this because from the point where hey if you don't agree with me then that must mean you hate me
Right.
personally like you have a personal problem with me and not I reject what you do. We've gotten to the same point that if you're not wholeheartedly affirming
Right.
what
Yeah, it
somebody
used to be
announces.
we just want tolerance. We just want to be able to do the things that we want to do without being bullied or harassed. And then it went to we want acceptance, which is we want you to acknowledge the legitimacy of what we're doing, and that you don't have the right to sort of say anything that would bother our consciences about it. But then it very quickly became, oh no, you have to celebrate it.
Yeah, it's time
Not
for
it's
worship
not
and genuflection.
right. It's not just that you have to say, okay, you're a woman. It's that you have to say you are a woman and you're beautiful, right? I mean, so like this is one of the funny things to me about the differences between men and women, right? Is like in recent years, Cosmo magazine has been putting like morbidly obese women every now and then
Oh
on the
yeah,
cover,
body
right?
positive.
Yeah, body positive stuff. So they put some lady who like literally is going to die of a heart attack at 40. You know, if she doesn't turn her life around, and it'll go healthy at any size, or this is any size is beautiful, and that doesn't happen in men's magazines, right? They don't. Uh, so I don't know who's the resident like Hollywood fat guy. You know, like Chris Farley used to be the resident comedic fat guy. But like
Jonah,
whoever.
what's his face?
Yeah,
He
Jonah
lost a
Hill.
lot of weight.
He
Jonah
lost a
Hill.
lot of weight, but right, it would be like back when Jonah Hill was heavier. They weren't going to put him on Men's Fitness and say healthy at any size. This is beautiful too, because guys know that they don't buy into the idea that they have to that they're already perfect the way that they are, and that's a thing in our culture that women are constantly taught is basically to be a liberated woman, to be a feminist is essentially to believe that women are already perfect the way they are, and that any problems that anyone ever has with women at any point ever are simply due to the fact that they don't realize how awesome women are. This is why Captain Marvel's the worst Marvel movie, because Iron Man grows. He has a character arc. Captain Marvel is awesome and amazing at the beginning, and then the only problem of the wisecracking, super confident girl who has no self-doubts is that she doesn't sufficiently believe in herself. And once she learns to believe in herself, then she becomes all powerful. So that's all of that is just kind of like floating around in our culture, that it's not just that you have to it's not just that you have to acknowledge, okay, I shouldn't bully this woman who's 200 pounds overweight. It's that I have to say she's beautiful. I have to say
Right.
that this is the way that humans are supposed to look. That there's something wrong with me if I don't find this to be appealing.
If you don't, you're fighting your own insecurities or
Right.
your own bigotry or your
Right.
own sinful nature,
Right.
as opposed to
Well,
just being
that
like,
was always the thing you'd hear like when I was growing up in college and stuff around so this is like the early 2000s. So it was prior to Obergefell, prior to the completely widespread acceptance of homosexuality, but everything was going in that direction.
I know exactly where you're
And
going with this.
and the line always was that if guys were repulsed by homosexuality, that it was because they were secretly harboring gay feelings. And that they were afraid of those feelings, and and so they were taking that self hatred and they were pouring it out on other people, as opposed to a much more obvious, like, as a much more obvious explanation of, like, well, first of all, like, 70 whatever percentage of the guys when I was in college were still pretty grossed out by it. It was a pretty high percentage, so we'll go with 70%, right?
Right.
It probably wasn't that 70% of guys were harboring secret homosexual desires. More likely, it's that men were repulsed by something that is unnatural, by something that is physically destructive to their bodies and not what their bodies are designed to do. But yeah, and so, like, that's the way that our culture has gone with everything, is that there's something wrong with you if you don't like the thing about me. But the weird thing, again, like, the thou doth protest too much thing,
Yeah.
about it, like, going back to what I was saying before about judgment, is, all right, think about the things that are the most important part of your identity for most people, and then how many of those things do you need other people to validate for you to feel confident in that, right? Like, if I meet a Muslim and I talk to him about how I'm a Christian, and he says, I don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that doesn't make me more suicidal. That's not going to raise my rates of self-harm. I'm going to go, oh, well, it'd be cool if you did. But it doesn't
Great.
change doesn't change the fact that I believe it, right? So when people say, no, you have to affirm trans people or they'll commit suicide, and you go, well, I don't want anyone to commit suicide, but can we maybe take a 5-second break and ponder the fact that if you need everyone else in the universe to validate your self-image in order to preserve your mental health, then we've probably misdiagnosed what's actually going on here.
Well,
Right.
misdiagnosis is a key phrase right there.
Right.
But I
So
mean,
so
I think the problem behind that is also the fact that you're holding yourself hostage
right.
to and using that as a reason to tell somebody they can't believe what they want, what they feel and genuinely feel in their
Yeah.
heart.
Well, you know what I think that is it, like, imagine that. I've dealt with back pain a lot in my adult life, and and pain's a really, really, really difficult thing to deal with because the science is still not particularly great at figuring it out. Sometimes they can figure out what the thing is, but other times you can go to 20 different specialists and they all think it's their thing. So you go to a chiropractor and he's like, we'll fix that with chiropractic. And you go to a surgeon, he goes, no, you need surgery. And everybody else, has the answer to this thing. And one of the most frustrating things in the world, if you've ever dealt with pain, is thinking for a little bit that you finally figured it out. You finally went to the right doctor. You went to an orthopedic microdermabrasion needle, whatever the needle person. What's that needle?
Acupuncturist.
Acupuncturist, right? Just like and it works for a little bit. This is the stuff I've experienced. I'd go to a physical therapist and they do their thing and it would work. And for 6 weeks, I'd think, oh my gosh, I'm finally out of this. And then the pain would come back. And it was the most soul crushing thing in the world because you thought you had the answer to what was going to fix your problem. And then you didn't. And it slipped through your fingers. And I think what's happening with this transgender stuff is, for a lot of people, the issue is They have severe mental health problems and depression, and they feel out of place and alone and desperate and sad and broken. And someone came along and convinced them it's because were born into the wrong body. You need to go just have the surgery, and you start dressing, so you're a man, you have your penis cut off, and the gross disgusting way that they turn that into a fake lady part. Read up on that if you want to understand why their suicide rates skyrocket back up.
Yo.
um, and you go through that, and then you start dressing, and you do the name change and all that stuff, and then you've convinced yourself that was it. I found the answer. That was the thing that was wrong. That was the fix that I needed to get everything back in joint. And so when people like me come along and refuse to acknowledge the legitimacy of a trans identity, it's like I'm walking right up to someone and staring them in the face, and I'm saying to them, the thing that you think works doesn't work. And it doesn't work. And the problem's just going to come back. And so it's this weird thing of everybody has to participate together to keep up the illusion, because otherwise it'll fall apart, and you just don't want to admit that it didn't work. It's like in sports, it's like if you I'm a big Colts fan, and a few years ago they traded a first round draft pick for a guy named Trent Richardson, who was a running back.
We were talking about
So one of the ended up
terrible.
I always feel bad when I talk about sports. Like I love all these people, and I want them all to have peace in life, and I don't want Trent Richardson to because he watches this, of course.
It was a bad business decision.
It was a bad business decision, and he just did not have the skill set to make it work. But they traded so much for him that they just kept running into a brick wall, because it was like they didn't want to admit that was an enormous mistake. And I think that is what so much of this is it's just people going, this is all I have left. If this doesn't work, I have nothing. I have nothing left if this doesn't work. And you see that when you look at the suicide rates of people who identify as trans, that they're super, super high, and then they'll get the surgery, and their rates of suicide and self-harm will dip for a little bit, and then they skyrocket back up, because over time, because the novelty of it wears off. And then the loneliness is even more crushing, because if you think about it for 5 seconds, right? Like, if you're a man and you have your body carved into what resembles a woman, you're not really a woman. So women aren't attracted to you because you're not a man anymore. But men aren't attracted to you because you're not really a woman. Gay men aren't attracted to you because you're not really a man, and lesbians aren't really attracted to you because you're not really a woman. So you've carved yourself into something that's not appealing to the vast majority of people, which makes it even harder to find companionship, and so you put yourself. So that's like I say, the rates of suicide and self-harm skyrocket back up.
Right, and it doesn't fix the problem. And as you said,
Right.
there's stuff that goes on that you have to. It's not just the surgery and you're done and everything's great. There's you have to continue. There's maintenance on that.
Really dehumanizing, painful, awful maintenance. That once the novelty wears off, to think I have to do this for the rest of my life. You can understand how that's such a destructive thing for people. So yeah, it's just very odd to me that that when people just automatically toss out the accusation that Christians are unloving when we don't embrace this, and you're going, what is being done to these folks is absolute barbarity. And a profound act of love is to say to someone, you don't need to do something that's going to destroy your body and that won't actually make you happy. And I want to help you by helping you solve the real thing that's causing this problem. I mean, like in the same way that women who struggle with anorexia, for example, it's a mental problem where what their brains are perceiving does not match reality. So they look at themselves and they're emaciated 96 pounds, and but what they perceive is a woman who's overweight. And when we say that, when there's a breakdown between your self perception and the objective reality of your body, in the case of anorexia, we don't say, well, she has an inner overweight girl. That's her body self image, right? That's the real her. We say we need to help fix your mental health so that so that your mind is accurately perceiving what you actually are.
Right.
And the idea that it's somehow so unloving to say to a person who identifies as trans, know that when you look at your body and you say that those parts aren't supposed to be there, that the problem is not with those parts. The problem is with your mind and how it is corrupting your perception of the objective reality of yourself.
Right. Yeah, the desire to find, like, you. I think the back problem thing is great. I have a friend who has dealt with lots of pain and trying to get it diagnosed, and it was a very very real struggle for her,
Mm-hmm.
and especially when it was something that when she thought it was identified, and then like, okay, this is the time, and then thankfully for her, they think they identified it, and she hasn't really had any issues for that. But I remember that whole problem because her and my wife are very close, and my wife would be telling me, it's like, man, she pains come
Mm-hmm.
back. It's just like, how are we gonna? And it's just like, really wish, really really hope and pray that we're able to identify what the cause is. And I think that's when it's your whole identity,
Yeah.
just because of depression or whatever it is going on. I can't get my mind into the mind of somebody who is suffering in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And the again, there's such a media push, there's such a societal push to say, well, if you feel like, if you're looking for a place to belong for people who are misfits, this is the misfit place. And but not they're
Right.
not really misfits. Everybody else is the misfit.
Yeah, well, and the way our culture has worked with this, and I think this just explains why you're seeing this massive explosion in the percentage of kids who are identifying as somewhere on the LGBT spectrum, is our culture does not permit free agent weirdos. If you're different, you need to belong to a union because the union will provide you protection. And
Prison.
right, yeah. So it's right, yeah. You're fair game to be devoured, unless you belong to a protected class. And when you look, in particular, when you look at the explosion of cases of kids identifying as something on the LGBT spectrum, by and large, it's youngerish kids and predominantly girls. So and I think if you think about this in terms of like union dues, right? So if you're going to join the LGBTQRSTV whatever union, it's not one group. It's a bunch of different groups that are all kind of connected together, and each of those groups has its own union dues that are on a scale of, some of them are very small, and then some of those dues are incredibly steep. And so in particular, like so nowadays you can identify as, you can just make up a new identity, right? And you can say you're queer, which literally can mean anything that you want. I mean, there have been cases of, I saw a video a while ago where some girl was describing how she's what's called demisexual, which means that she's only sexually attracted to people that she has an emotional connection to. And I
Oh yeah, I
remember
think
a bunch of people watching that going, that's called being a woman. Like,
I've
that's called being a non-promiscuous woman. That's called being the vast majority of women in the history of the world. The idea that you're like, I'm different. I am so different. I'm not into like having risky sex with men that I just met 5 minutes ago. And you're going, that's called being normal. That's
yeah,
called
good.
the way that that's supposed to work, right? But so you can make up your own thing and it doesn't really, and you don't actually have to act on it. Um, and you can, and even for like younger girls, you can say you're bisexual, but you don't actually have to have a sexual relationship with a woman to keep that card. You can just sort of say it. You say that you're gay. You say that you're a male who's gay. It's not going to be super long before you're required to pay your dues, and those dues are very, very steep. And that's probably why you don't see nearly as many. You've seen a rise in young men identifying as gay, but not like the explosion in
Right.
rates of this that you've seen in other things. So, so that's basically the way this works. Is if you are, if you're a boy, if you're a 14-year-old boy, and you're not super into girls, and you're not super into sports, and you're kind of more artistic, and you like drama and other things, right? People are going to look at you, and they're gonna go, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? And if you say, no, I'm not gay. This is just, I like doing this stuff. They're going to go, no, you're weird, and you'll get made fun of, and you'll get bullied. But the
Right.
second that you claim this stuff, right? And then likewise, if you look at the second if you claim to be gay, then they can't make fun of you. And then you have a group of people that accept you. And then you have an explanation for why it is that you don't like the things that the guys your age typically like. And then, of course, you're put into a position then when you're highly susceptible to predators. Um, and or you've seen the thing with young women who are coming out as trans, right? So you don't have to see a lot of these videos that make the rounds on TikTok and Twitter and stuff like that to notice a very, very consistent trend, which is that these are largely unattractive, socially awkward girls who have zero social capital. And they can go from no one paying attention to them and no one noticing them to all of a sudden you identify as trans, or gender non-conforming or whatever it is, and you get a moment where everybody notices you and stands up and applauds you for your bravery and tells you how wonderful you are, and you all of a sudden have power over the adults in your life. You can get your teachers fired if they don't use your new name or terminology. You can cause absolute hell in your parents' lives if they refuse to acknowledge this stuff like that. I mean, it's just and you get social protection. So you used to be a girl who could easily be bullied and no one noticed or no one paid attention to, and then for 5 minutes you get all of the attention in the world,
You are the
and
bully.
then you get to be the bully. You get to take down anyone who's not affirming of you. Um, well, the appeal of that is massive. What hormonally distraught teenager wouldn't want to have social immunity, and then the ability to destroy your enemies?
Yeah.
I mean that's like this is the biggest things that you could possibly want when you're at that point in your life. So it's just to me it's abundantly clear what all of this is, and the unwillingness of people to acknowledge, okay, if you have a 500% increase, in 4 years of girls identifying as trans, it's not because all of them really were secretly trans before and they just didn't know how to express it, it wasn't accepted. It's a social contagion.
Right.
Like the Salem witch trials, or the what was the thing in the 80s where everyone became convinced that their kids were in preschools or daycares that were secretly using the kids for satanic rituals and stuff like that. Again, a bunch of people went to jail for supposedly abusing kids in satanic rituals that 100% didn't remotely
Oh,
do
I
it.
didn't. That one's.
It's a crazy thing you can read about, the satanic panic of the 80s. Yeah, I mean, there were people who legitimately went to jail because this was the panic that was going around, and a bunch of prosecutors basically led kids in their, like some 5-year-old kid who you're grilling, and eventually the kid realizes that this adult just wants me to say that these people did the things that they're saying the adult did.
Oh yeah.
And so they do, and then people's lives end up being destroyed on account of it. It's a social contagion.
Me Too did that a lot. I mean, there were
Oh
you
yeah.
could yeah, that was a big one where a lot of times it felt like, and it wasn't necessarily the person who was the target of whatever comment, but or not comment or whatever, but somebody perceived that somebody did something to somebody else, and then all of a sudden it's just like right on there,
Right.
and it
Yeah,
mixed, and that does the disservice of people who actually have a complaint of something
right.
going on, and now it's just like been lumped in with all the rest of this.
Yeah, I remember that where there at first, you're starting when that kind of first started happening, you were getting all these terrible stories, and everyone's going, "Oh, this guy's the worst. You got to put this guy in jail forever." This Harvey Weinstein's got to go away for the rest of his life, and needs to every cent that he has should be taken away. And then people just the bar kept getting lowered, you know, and it was basically like, well, I went on a date with a celebrity, and he was a little handsy with me.
Yeah,
And you're going, okay, just so you know, there are actual women out there who have been legitimate victims of really terrible things, and you're robbing them of the ability to have justice by chiming in and just needing people to pay attention to you for 5 seconds for something that's not even remotely worth addressing. So,
yeah. The one I saw most recently was a some journalist lady. She said, I was going to go on a date with this guy. He found out I was a journalist, and he said he wasn't interested. And she goes,
oh yeah,
guess whose court records I'm going to be looking up tonight.
oh
It's just
yeah,
like,
yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that's one of those like, what would someone else have to do for you to think that was psycho?
yeah, like,
Like you clearly don't think that you're a crazy lady. What would another lady have to do for you to go, that lady's nuts? She's gotta go see a psychiatrist or something.
how many cats do you have to
Right,
own?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have not even approached humor really, other than laughing at some things. But I think
Well
this
then
is
let's do it.
all right.
Let's approach
So
humor.
yes, this has been great. I don't want to say that we've got. I mean, this is great content, but the reason I wanted to get you on is because it's kind of hand in hand with what I'm doing right now. Is when I don't have a guest on or I don't have a specific topic, I'm reading through the Bible a couple of chapters at a time from Genesis to Revelation, and so right now the great book of Numbers, very very enticing book of Numbers. I think we were talking about the census,
Hmm.
but as we go through Genesis, and I know this from being in the Bible, it comes across most people's perception, most layperson who isn't a Christian and hasn't really read the Bible other than the passages that somebody threw at them at one point, whatever. They look at the Bible as a book of its rules, its judgment, it's dry, and there certainly are parts that are some of those things. But another description that you can often attribute to the Bible is humorless. And while I find many times things that are funny, like Aaron telling Moses, "Oh, the golden calf
Yeah.
just popped out of this flame that we threw
It's
it
the
all in.
weirdest
We don't know
thing,
how it
man.
got here."
I was
Right.
just sitting there. I'll pop this calf. Yeah.
The idea Jacob wrestling with God. It's just like like it's such an odd event to happen. It's humorous. What we don't see is a whole lot of points in the Bible where somebody is laughing or somebody cracks a joke.
Mm.
We there's that one instance with Elijah talking mocking the other guys,
Right.
but he's doing it all from a very righteous perspective. It's like, oh, I'm sorry that your guy's so tired from his long journey for wherever. But and that's funny, and you laugh at that. Again, you go through there, and I don't see it. And I was looking for somebody who um, does a good job um, s- teaching things biblically with a humorous turn. Where do you find humor in the Bible, or
Yeah.
what? Or
So,
if it's
yeah. The Bible doesn't really have jokes in it, but when you look at things from a certain perspective, the Bible is absolutely hilarious. So all over the place because sin in many ways, sin is funny because it's stupid. It's such like if you just look at the sins that you've committed in your life, the things that really trouble you, if you take a step back and kind of try and look at them as though you were another person, you would say that's such a hilariously stupid thing to do. Like, why would you think that that is going to improve your situation? So when you look at things from that perspective, the Bible is hilarious. So I mean, there are a couple of examples, like the story of Simeon and Levi massacring the Shechemites is one of the funniest things in the history of the world. All right, if you don't know it, let me tell you the story, right? So there's Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons and one daughter. He has a daughter named Dinah. Now, the start of the story is not funny. I'll preface that with the first thing's not funny, and then it's going to get really funny after that. So Dinah gets kidnapped and raped by a guy named Shechem, and that part is not funny. But then afterwards, Shechem and his dad go to her brothers, and her dad's and Shechem's dad is like, okay, you know how my son just did like the second worst thing that you can do to a person? And they go, uh-huh. And he goes, and you know how he just like did that to your sister? And they go, yeah, we remember that. And he goes, okay, well, thing is, he's like crazy in love with her. So could they get married? Would that be cool? Would you let him marry your sister? And Simeon and Levi, and they go, well, yes, he did just do the worst thing, the second worst thing that you can possibly do to someone, the kind of thing that causes people to go to war and murder each other all the time. But I tell you what, we can make this work. There's just one little thing we need you to do. We need all of you guys to be circumcised. And you can imagine that Shechem and his guys are like, what's that? And they go, okay, well, it's just this thing, and it's going to hurt. It's like, they go like, okay, what's circumcision? And they go, okay, so imagine the most painful thing that could ever happen to you. And they go, uh-huh. And they go, yeah, it's that. It's the worst possible thing.
It's what you're thinking right now. It's Mel Brooks in Robin Hood Men in Tights going, oh yeah, I got the little guillotine here.
Right, yeah. And they all do it. And you can imagine, like, surely there had to be one guy in the village who's looking at Shechem and he's going like, dude, have you met Jeff's sister? She's really into you, and we wouldn't have to all do the thing that's definitely 50 million% going to end with them coming into our town and killing all of us. And he's like, no, these guys are good guys. I trust them. We're all going to do it. And then, so they all get circumcised, and then they're all lying in bed. They can't get up. And then Simeon and Levi come in and just stab, kill. And they just murder all of them. And I bet you anything that at that point, like, right, Shechem's lying in a tent. He's got his buddy Jeff across from him. And Simeon and Levi rush in, and Jeff makes eye contact with him, and he looks at Shechem. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I knew it! I knew this was gonna be the case."
Great idea, you said.
Yeah,
cut
right.
your foreskin off. He said.
So that stuff is hilarious. It's the story of Samson is hilarious. So all right, one of the things that's funny to me about atheists is they pick certain things where they go, well, the Bible's ridiculous because of this story, right? So they'll talk about like Jonah getting swallowed by the whale, and that's the most unbelievable thing in the world. And they go, oh, there's no fish that could just like someone could live in their belly, so it's not possible. And you go, yeah, well, first of all, I know, but if there's a God who can do whatever he wants, all things are kind of possible. But the other thing is the story of Jonah is actually way cooler if you buy into the interpretation, which I am inclined to, that Jonah 100% died in the belly of the fish and then was resurrected onto the shore. Makes the sign of Jonah, as Jesus describes it, a bit more intense and more direct.
I like that. That's a very cool take on.
Yeah. So. But for some reason, atheists never bring up Samson, which, like, Samson, who gets mad at the Philistines for so he for
The
so
The original John Wick.
yeah, I mean it's right, John Wick, except for instead of guns, it's you tie foxes together at their tails and put torches in them and send them into your thing. And so the thing that's hilarious to me about the story of Samson, right? So just to go over it briefly, right? So Samson marries this Philistine woman because he knows he's supposed to go to war with the Philistines, and then he like comes up with some riddle, and he won't tell her what it is, and she pesters him, so he finally tells her the riddle, and she tells her clan, and he can't. I forget exactly what the detail is, but it was something having to do monetarily. I think he didn't get money that he wanted from them or something like that. I may be wrong about that. Forgive me if I am.
They had
But
some. There was a riddle at a party, and
yeah,
he
and so
won, and everybody was mad about it.
yeah, and so then he kills a bunch of people, and then they get mad at him, and they're like, right, well, we're going to take your wife and give her to another guy, which is like, I mean, it wouldn't be cool if they were getting along, but like if you murdered 30 of her cousins, you kind of like, oh, okay, we kind of took that as a divorce, right? That's um, and then he gets mad at them for ending his marriage, so he burns all their crops down by tying foxes together at the tail and putting torches in them and sending them into their crops. So it's crazy and absolutely insane. I would never believe it if it weren't true. but but the thing that's so funny about it is, so the story of Samson is, I think, in many ways, the story of, it's a way of God showing us how long suffering he is. So because Samson knows he's been raised up to go to war with the Philistines. And it's like Samson, that was like the only thing that Samson learned. and everything else, he was like, I'm just going to wing it the whole time.
Learn how to tie wildlife together.
I'm going to be insane, and I'm going to do the most insane things at every step of the way. And the whole time you can just imagine God going, I raised you up to do this, and I'm going to let you do this because I need to show my people that my promises I keep my promises. But you are the most insane person I have ever known in my entire life, and you are making all of this so difficult, so difficult on me. That it's like Samson is like, if you have kids and your kids have to do something by themselves and they're doing it completely the wrong way, and as a parent you're just going, I told you I was going to let you do this, but everyone's going to die if you keep doing things the way that you did, the way that you're choosing to do them. So all of that is to me is utterly hysterical. The fact that it's funny that the chief priests can't see that Jesus is the Christ, right? So like this whole time they're conspiring against him. And at no point, so there's the bit where Caiaphas says, "Hey, you guys don't know what you're talking about. It's better that one man should die than that the whole nation should perish." And at no point does anyone go, you know what that kind of sounded like? Kind of sounded like that bit about the suffering servant from Isaiah 52:3, and how he's going to die for the on behalf of the people. And you go, oh, that's kind of that was in the Bible. And yeah, but Jesus says he's the Messiah. But does anyone know where he was born? And they go, well, he's from Galilee, but born in Bethlehem. They go, Bethlehem, right. The city of David, where the prophet prophesied that the Savior of the world was going to be born. And Isaiah was like, what did he say the Messiah was going to do? And they're like, it's raise the dead and heal the sick and cast out demons and preach the good news. And you go, right. And why don't we like Jesus? And they go, because he's too popular. And they go, right. And why is he so popular? And they go, because he's been raising the dead and healing the sick and casting out demons. And you go, okay, I'm starting to see a trend here. Real quick, what's that rumor about Jesus's parents? And they go, oh yeah, that Joseph isn't really his father, that his mom was unfaithful. And they go, right. And why is that a rumor? And they go, well, because no one believed the other thing. And they go, what was the other thing? And they go, that he was born of a virgin. They're like, right, just like the Isaiah prophesied. You go, and they go, okay, shoot, guys, we're about 5 inches away from murdering the Son of God. Maybe
Yeah.
we should take a step. Like that doesn't happen
Let's
at all.
just
And
hang our hat
it's
on.
hilarious that they've just got it right in front of their faces the entire time, and at no point does anyone go, like, even after Jesus rises from the dead, right? So the soldier goes to Annas and Caiaphas and he goes, hey, you know that tomb I was guarded, that Jesus guy? And they go, yeah. And he goes, yeah, he's like 100% rose from the dead. Angel, stone rolled away. I saw the whole thing. And they go, here's some money. Go tell everyone that his disciples stole the body. So they have proof of the resurrection, and yet they don't believe it, which is sad and tragic, but it's also hilarious when you look at it from a certain perspective. So anytime you're dealing with sin, like I mean, just Cain and Abel, right? I was reading that text the other day, and and Cain, right? So God comes up to Abel, and he's like, "Hey, Abel, it's me, God. You know, the guy, one who knows everything, all powerful creator.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing in the universe that I don't know. Where's your brother?" And Cain goes, "You imagine Cain had to have been 13. Like, we don't want to think about. We always depict them as older, but it's a very snotty 13-year-old response. Like, I don't know, right? So where's your brother? I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? And like Cain's just he's so mad at God because God accepted Abel's sacrifice that he can't figure out. God knows the answer to the question. It's not like God. What does he expect God to do? Be like, oh, you're right.
Oh.
I was out of line, buddy. I'm sorry. I apologize for asking you.
I'll go look somewhere else.
Your own flesh and blood that you just murdered is. I don't know that you murdered him. I'm not all knowing. It's so that it's all of it is hilarious if you look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, and I always, one of the biggest things I say on this, on anywhere when it comes to Christianity, is becoming a parent. At least for me, becoming a father, puts so many things into perspective. And it's just like, yeah, how many times have you come up to your kid and you ask them a question that you already know the answer to, and they should know because of the manner in which you're asking it.
Yeah,
that they should know that you know the answer to the question. It's like when I ask my son, "Did you brush your teeth?" And he knows that I've been in there and checked to see if the toothbrush was even wet, right? And he goes, the pause is like. The gears keep turning. He's like, wait, what are my possible outcomes?
Yeah, it's them trying to calculate the odds of he's gonna know that I'm lying, but how likely is he to actually interrogate me? You know, and one of my favorite spots in the Bible too is, and this one is like just legitimately hilarious, and I want to ask God about it when I see him face to face because it's so funny. It's in Samuel when Jesse's bringing out all of his sons for Samuel to figure out which one is the king, and they bring out David, right? And it goes, and the text says, or rather, Jesse says, "Well, there's one young son, but my youngest, but he's out in the fields." Like Jesse presumes, well, it obviously couldn't be David because he's just some kid out tending sheep. And Samuel goes, "Oh, no. The Lord is not impressed by outward appearances. What matters to him is the character of one's heart." And then literally 2 verses later, it's like David came in and he was incredibly handsome and good looking.
He comes in.
So you could, I'm not, I doubt this was a textual criticism spot, but where part of you wonders if David was sort of looking over, the shoulder of a scribe there and being like, yeah, but do point out that I was good looking. Like, I agree. God wasn't impressed with me because I was good looking, but I don't want people thinking that I wasn't good looking. It's a very kind of like Hallmark Christmas movie type of thing where, like in the Hallmark Christmas movie where the girl who works at, her grandparents' horse farm, right? And the guy she grew up with comes back home and he's got the worst he's got the fiance who's the worst woman who's ever lived in the history of the world. And that's not, and my favorite thing about those movies is it's not a knock on his character that he asked Hitler in a fur coat and sunglasses to be his wife. And but the thing I always love about those movies is, right, so the girl who works on the horse farm is supposed to be the underdog, right? She's outclassed by this fancy Hollywood movie lady. But the actress who plays the girl who works at the horse farm is never actually less attractive than the actress who plays the other one. And so you can see the very kind of complicated mechanics of the shallow female psyche here, right? Where it's
I could see
on
David's...
the one hand, I want to be loved and embraced for who I am in my heart, not based on how I look. However, I also need everyone to know that I'm very good looking.
Yeah, but like
And so I love, right? So I love that. I love that part where it's just like, God, it's okay if you're ugly. God will still love you. However, David was really good looking, and we don't want anyone to be misled on that point.
Standing over the scribe going, I wasn't scrawny. You weren't there. You won't know.
Is scrawny the word we really we want to use?
Like,
I'd say I was ruddy and handsome and had beautiful eyes.
As opposed to pimp zits and zits and gangly awkwardness. Like he was probably like he was all legs and knees walking in or something like.
Yeah, he had to. That's the question: is like how old David was at the time, and we hope he was through his awkward years at that point. It wouldn't be fair if David looked that good when he was like 14. It's like the rough years.
Maybe I don't know. It would have been funny to see Goliath's reaction if like a miniature jock shows up and he's like, okay, maybe I need to take this guy somewhat seriously. Because you always from playing church softball, you always see the athletic guy come to the plate, the guys who are like seasoned guys, and then you've got the kids that show up, but then you're like, yeah, that kid probably plays high school ball right now, and he's going to smoke this ball right at me probably. So
you can always tell how committed a congregation is to church discipline and rigorous discipleship based upon who they let play on their softball team. So it's like, this guy hasn't been to church in 2 years. He's probably not a Christian. But he's got an arm.
The joke we had.
So we'll bring him out on game day.
The joke we have, because we had this, because actually we had our managers meeting because we're gearing up for the season to start, and the problem that we've had in our league is this, there's just less interest in it all, less interest in softball all around, and so like the league has shrunk considerably. But we had a team last year that was just showing up like you get the guys with the jerseys, and you recognize the jerseys because you play with these guys year in season out. You're like, okay, and then there's like 3 of them on the team, and then everybody else has got semi-pro jerseys with sponsorships and everything, and none of them match. Yeah. So they all show up, and you're like, and one of the coaches was for another team. He came up to me. He goes, "Yeah, I was first base coaching," and I asked the guy, he goes, "Where's your church, Ray?" He goes, "I don't know." Right at him, said, "I don't know." And then we're like, "Okay, we got a problem we need to address here," because we used to have the problem, but we've reached a point now where like we've got committed guys that want to play, and then but at the same time we're like, my team specifically, we've got a lot of people who played and then they have moved away, or they're something's going on where they're in another church, but that church doesn't have a team. So I do whatever I can, but I tell them, I was like, look, two church events a month. That's the requirement. I was like, I got to get you in here because there's got to be some semblance of an appearance that you care, and they all are for the most part. And it's good fellowship, and we tell them, we try to make the argument that, hey, maybe we can get a guy in. that just wants to play. He's not a ringer. He's not great. And then he sees the way we treat each other, the fellowship that we
Hmm.
got. And then he's like, oh, maybe I'll, these guys are fun. Maybe I'll come to church. And then he gets connected. And then the next thing you know, it's, because you want to get the father figure of the family in the church because,
Right. Yeah.
I never realized this till somebody quoted me the numbers. It makes sense. But, how effective getting the father into church
Yeah.
actually is for getting the whole family into the church.
Yeah, and the kids growing up staying in church is that
Yeah.
when dads take on that role of being the spiritual head of their household, their kids by and large will stick with it. But when dads don't, they fall away. So
As opposed to Solomon, who just had lots of kids.
yeah, that's a lot of children and a lot of wives and a lot of trouble. It's yeah. I once had an argument with a guy who was trying to tell me that polygamy was not wrong because the Bible never says that polygamy is not wrong. And my argument was, well, do you really need it to tell you that it's
It pretty
wrong
much does
when it
indirectly.
ruins everyone's lives really badly whenever it's practiced? Like so, hey, like if you saw a movie where that was about drugs, and at the end of the movie, everyone died from drugs. You wouldn't walk out of the movie and be like, "They never said not to do drugs," so I don't know what the message of that film was. I don't think we can say drugs are bad because the guy who died with 18 needles in his arm never said it. While that weren't his dying words.
Oh, I wish I
Right.
hadn't have done this.
Right. Right. This was morally unacceptable. So yeah, you don't really need that to recognize like, hey, David had to bury a bunch of sons because of his polygamy, and Joseph's brothers threw him down a well and left him for
That's
dead because of
Imagine a
polygamy. And
story of a man
yeah,
who's married to 4 wives at the same time, or a reality TV show because apparently those exist. But
yeah,
he's got 4 wives and sons with all of them, and one of them ends up getting thrown into a well because
yeah,
would you not say that maybe there's a different family dynamic going on
right,
there that's not completely conducive to togetherness? There's no
yeah,
competition going on.
yeah. My sons fight, but they've never been prepared to murder one of the other ones. Which I attribute to the fact that only one wife.
Like, well, yeah, and then it gets pretty real very fast. It's like, okay, I always feel bad for Leah because it's like she was the
Yeah,
unwanted one and she only wanted to be accepted. And the only thing she had on on Rebecca was, or Rachel, was it Rachel?
yeah,
Rachel
Rachel, yeah,
was I can have the kids. You
right,
can't. I can have the kids, you can't. So but then Rachel goes, that's okay. I'll get my handmaiden to do it for
right,
me. And it's like, okay, I can't have kids anymore. So I'm gonna get my handmaiden.
right.
The whole thing is just none of this. And
Yeah.
that was like the
And you can
long list
imagine
of,
or Jacob looking at all this and going, "Well, if it has to be done, it has to be done." It's another example of the Bible being funny. I've often wondered that about Abraham and Sarah, and so Abraham goes through, he's like, "Hey, this is great news. God said we're gonna have a baby," and Sarah's despondent, and Abraham should be comforting her, and she goes, "Oh no, I bet that means that just like I'm gonna die soon and you'll marry another wife." And Abraham goes, "No, no, no, of course not. Of course the Lord's talking about you. You're my wife. You're the wife that he gave me." And she goes, "No, I think maybe that just means that you'll take another wife at some point." And he goes, "Sarah, have confidence. Believe in our Lord's promises." And she goes, "No, maybe it just means that you'll impregnate my incredibly attractive Egyptian maidservant." And Abraham goes, "Yeah, I think this might be onto something there with that one. It's a good call. Good job of exegeting the word of our Lord there." And so they don't actually trust in God's promises, and it yields sour grapes, to say the
and then
least. So
the afterwards is like, you did this, and he's like, whoa, wait a minute, hold
yeah,
on, this was your idea.
yeah, right,
You brought
yeah.
her to me. You figure it out.
Right, yeah, yeah. It's a mess of a situation. So
She's like, oh, and you can see it's like the lowly maid servant or whatever, but now
yeah,
she's got the baby, right? And so she's like, like
yeah, yeah. It's
totally
it's a
showing
it's
up
a
Sarah.
it's a mess all around. So
That's a so okay. I will admit I do see more humor in a lot of what David writes
Hmm.
was is that Proverbs. Who wrote Proverbs? Was Solomon.
Solomon.
Solomon. A lot of what Solomon writes is hilariously true.
Hmm.
It's full of truisms that you can laugh at. One of the things I want to encourage people to do is if you can take a joke and your spouse can take a joke and your friends can take a joke, do a group study of Proverbs as couples because
Oh yeah.
everyone's in the doghouse at the end of that one.
Yeah,
So
I've been going through that in my midweek Bible study, and we were just going through the verse. I think it's from Proverbs 17 about I forget the exact language, but basically, it would be better for you to run into a bear robbed of her cubs than for you to endure a fool and his folly. Um, Now it's a proverb and it's literature, but that's a solid stand-up joke. I mean, that's if you just change the verbiage around a little bit. If you were doing a stand-up bit where you're talking about having a stupid friend, like so, if you have a friend who's uh, who's always into, if you have a friend who works in pyramid schemes, like you, it would be better. I would rather run into a bear robbed of her cub than a guy from high school who's trying to get me to invest in a pyramid scheme. I would, if my options are to run into Bryce from high school who's trying to get me to invest in a pizza coupon business, I would, and that it's my choice is talk to Bryce for 30 minutes, invest in his pizza coupon company, or watch a bear eat my stomach as the last thing that I see. I
I'll
would
choose the
choose the
bear
bear,
every time.
right?
Like,
That's hilarious.
wife comes home. Megan convinced me to start buying to be a distributor for Lularoe.
Oh
Oh,
yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. Girls are worse with that than I've seen a meme floating around. So I'm obviously not a lady, so I don't get this, but apparently it's a very common thing on Facebook that if you get a message from a girl that you went to high school with 25 years ago, it's not her checking up to see how you're doing. It's a pyramid scheme. So she's trying to get you to invest in some sort of essential oils pyramid scheme.
somebody, you want to buy cutlery?
I always love that stuff. Like when it's one thing if people go, "Hey, here's this oil that you can put on that'll help a little bit with pain," right? But they always oversell it. Is that it's always like this is a what this works better than drugs. It is a miracle cure for ailments, and you go, no, it's not, because if it were, you wouldn't be selling it. Like rich people would sell it. You, if it worked, you would. They wouldn't
Yeah,
have to. They wouldn't have to ask you to do it. It's like those spam emails you used. You that we all probably still get, but now we have spam filters for anyone who had email about 20 years ago or so, 25 years ago, they didn't have the spam filters that they have now. So you
right.
would just get this stuff all the time. And so you would get stuff that was like, "Hey, do you want this cure for baldness works?" No, it doesn't. If it
Yeah,
worked, you would be a billionaire. But
this
it doesn't work. If it worked, you wouldn't have to send me an unsolicited email to try to get me to buy your product.
the short infomercial with the guy wearing the suit with all the question marks telling you
Yeah.
how to
Oh
make
yeah.
money. Was
Yeah,
always
his
one of them.
book about how you could get government grants for
That's
all
what
of these
government
things. Yeah,
grants.
yeah, I remember that guy. Yeah, right. Yeah, like if these things worked, you would get rich people would have this job.
Yeah, this is what was the other problem? Was like if your wife is mad at you, you
Yeah,
might as well just sit on the sit over top of the
yeah.
stoop of your um window or something
Oh
like
right,
that.
yeah. There's a lot of those about quarrelsome women. You
Yeah,
know that was inspired by one of those wives. Um,
or
or
many of
concubines,
them.
or many many of them that Yeah, when a lady does not want to be happy, that there are not words that you can speak to make her happy. This is why men and women should draw a truce, which is women won't agree to this, but I wish they would. Which is, if you're having an argument with a woman, if you can make her laugh twice, the argument's over. She's not allowed to be mad anymore. If you can make her laugh 2 times, that's the end of it. That should be the end of it. But women will not. They won't agree to. They won't agree to those terms. But it should be.
Well, that's like the old Dane Cook line, which he probably stole from somebody. But he used to say, you have the argument. She says, "You're stupid, just like your father," and you blow it off. But then, like 20 minutes later, you're downstairs doing something, and you're like, "My father was a brilliant man."
Yeah.
You're yelling it at her because she knew just right how to get you.
Yep.
So how does we all know the corny pastor line who comes up there and he starts the sermon off with a joke, but your humor is much more sophisticated than that.
Yeah.
How do you use that to? I mean, is that how you generally do? Do you design sermons around this type
I'm
of
not
stuff?
funny in my sermons. So
Okay.
I mean, I'll occasionally have a quip here and there, but not often. And yeah, it's kind of a funny thing for people who know me. That's not a surprise at all because I take theology incredibly seriously, and then I don't take much of anything else seriously. And as what I remember when I was in college, a friend of mine was once explaining to me to a friend of his that where she just didn't really like me and was very kind of confused about me, and he just said unless Hans is talking about Jesus, he's joking. So sermons, I'm serious, and which has been I've had 1 or 2 times people who knew my YouTube channel and were maybe passing through and came to my church, and I think were very confused when I got up into the pulpit and was direct and sincere and not joking around. So yeah, I hate stupid pastor jokes from the pulpit, because because they don't bring people closer to God. So that you don't when you okay. So it's kind of hard to do this on the computer because my hands are backwards. But
Right.
so if this is where God is and where He invites you to be, to dwell in His holiness, humor and informality in worship, it's doesn't bring us up here. It brings God down here. It encourages people to not take the faith seriously. So I am not at all a fan of pastors making dumb jokes in sermons because it projects to the congregation that the pastor is just a loser who wanted a captive audience and this was an easy way to get it. And unfortunately I think that is the case for a lot of pastors, and that spans every denomination. I made a comment of this nature when I saw a video
Yes, I
recently
shared that on the stream, by the way.
okay, yeah, of a Catholic priest who was
The guitar.
blessing the congregation with a guitar, and he's talking about basically like "Let us rock with you, Lord" or something stupid like that. And there are a lot of Lutheran pastors I know that would do something similar, where it's embarrassing, it profanes the holiness of God by making it seem common and corny, and you can just tell this is a guy who wanted people to like him, and the church was a captive audience, and they'll be nice and they'll put up with him, and sweet little old ladies will tell him that he's funny because they don't know what else to say. So I'm not.
That's nice.
Yeah, exactly. Right, because they don't. There's not another phrase for it. Yeah, I'm not. I'm very rarely funny in church because my job as a pastor is to deliver the forgiveness of sins and to do it directly in that instance. Whereas the stuff I do with like Lutheran satire is I'm not trying to be people's pastor. in that situation. I'm trying to use humor to drive people to a pastor and to drive people to the church. So that's basically my goal with it. Is it's when I put a video together, it's not that I expect that someone will go, "Oh, cool, I'm going to be a Lutheran now," because that guy's funny, or because I said something in a clever way. My hope with it is, and thanks be to God, I know this has happened in some cases. I've had people contact me about this, where people, because Lutherans are kind of not on folks' radar for there's a lot of reasons for that I probably don't have time to go into at this point, but a lot of people don't really know the first thing about Lutherans, and in my experience, there have been a lot of times where people have basically said, I knew I was missing something in the church that I was going to, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, and I didn't know how to articulate what was missing. And usually what that was preaching that was focused on the forgiveness of sins and on Christ. And people were walking out of, they were going to church, and they were basically being told a bunch of stuff that they had to do for Jesus. And they were basically being told that unless you're leading a holier life, you can't really be certain that you're a Christian. And they knew that that's not really what church was supposed to be, but they couldn't articulate what it was supposed to be. And what it is supposed to be is the job of a pastor is to cover you in the blood of Christ, is to ensure that he never walks out of the pulpit without having told you that that your sins are forgiven, without telling you that the reason Christ came into this world was to be your righteousness, was to be your Savior, was to give you everything that you needed to be worthy of eternal life. And so that's what I want to push people towards. So with my videos, what I try to do is basically knock down hindrances to people considering the Lutheran Church, and to sort of get the Lutheran Church on people's radar, to get the Lutheran Confession of Faith on people's radar, to knock down the typical objections, at least that I'm aware of, that people have had to considering that, so that they'll kind of hear something and go, I've never really heard that quite put like that before. I think I might like to maybe learn more about this. And then
Spark interest.
Right. Then they sparks interest, and then they go talk to an actual pastor who can actually have a pastoral relationship with them, and give them the gospel. So yeah, to me, everything has a proper place. There's a time to, as Ecclesiastes says, there's a time for everything, and a time for every purpose under heaven. So that there's a time to joke, there's a time to laugh, there's a time to be serious, there's a time to be merciful, there's a time to be bold and to wield the sword. There's a time for everything, and you have to just kind of trust that the Holy Spirit will guide you to know which season is the proper season, and that obviously that Christ will forgive you when you get those things wrong, which I'm sure I do from time to time.
Well, the exception to that rule is that it is never a time to bless the church with your guitar, your acoustic
Yeah,
guitar.
don't bless the church with your acoustic guitar. There's not a season for that. There's not a season to afflict the church with your festering nerdery.
The one thing worse than posting cringe on the internet is preaching cringe
Ugh.
at the pulpit.
It is. It's a bad thing where your job as a pastor is to get out of the way and to give people Jesus.
Yeah.
And I have very, very little patience for guys who refuse to get out of the way and who need to make everything about themselves. There's a million different lines of work that and one of the things too, like one of the things that bothered me about that video is you've got a sermon every week. Every week you have a sermon where you can say whatever you want and you can do whatever you want. Like, you don't need to mess with the stuff that's very clearly not about you and supposed to be about Jesus. So stop. It's like, like pastors wanting to sing songs that they wrote for the congregation. Stop it. Like, didn't you know that guy in college
Yeah, I was about
who
to
would
say the
who
guy in
who
college
would
on the
just
steps.
who would just impose himself on an entire room at a party with his garbage song? Like, I write music, and I hate performing songs for people. Like, I'll let you listen to it, and I'll just send you a link to it, and if you want to tell me later that you like it, that's nice, but I don't want to like be in the room while you're figuring out whether or not you like something, and then having to, if you don't, having to figure out how to conceal the fact that you don't like it on your face. Like, it's not. No, 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 no.
That
No,
would be.
and and especially with church, like there's already really good church music. The odds that I'm gonna write something that's gonna that's greater than the treasure trove of hymns that we already have is not, especially those odds aren't very good, and I'll let someone else make that judgment, right? That's what George Lucas should have done with the script for the Phantom Menace. Is he should have put a committee together and said, here are 10 fan scripts, and then one of these is mine, but they're all unmarked. Read all 10 scripts and tell me which one you think is the best. And they would, and which one's the worst. And they would have all come back, and they would have all said, well, some of these are good, a couple of them were really really great. This Phantom Menace thing, though, that thing is trash. Whoever wrote,
That's
how did,
pod racing.
right? Yeah, and George Lucas would have gone, oh shoot, that's the only way to get an honest answer from, is to take yourself out of the equation. So you got to do that as a pastor. You got to
I,
just not make it about yourself.
I know you're a Star Wars fan, so and we were talking about
I
Captain
used to.
Marvel.
I mean, I'm not like growing up. I was like, I am a Star Wars fan. I love Star
Oh
Wars.
yeah,
And then I met people who were really into it. I was like, I'm clearly, apparently, not a
not
fan.
that
I
much.
thought I was, but
I thought I remember watching. I mean, that was the same way. Like I had the micro machines and everything, but I didn't LARP or I didn't go
yeah,
to super extremes. But I really enjoyed the movies. I could watch them all the time, and I was very excited when the previews came out that I could actually. Well, no, when they remastered them with cut scenes, I could
yeah,
actually go to the movie theater and see it because I was too young to
yeah.
have done it earlier. But um, the Phantom Menace, it was Phantom Menace. I enjoyed, and I was younger, right when it came out. I actually worked for a guy. His son had cancer around that time, and he was in part. His son survived, and he actually worked with me too. But he was with Make a Wish, and his Make a Wish was that he just wanted to be like an extra in
Mm.
um, one of the prequel movies. I think it was Phantom Menace, and George Lucas goes, "No." So no. So he's like, I'm kind of glad they bombed. But
Yeah,
the second one was really the one for me because I thought it was cool that Anakin had a backstory, but then it was like, then you got to realize that Anakin's got to be an angsty teenager.
right.
Nobody wants to see that.
Yeah,
It's
I saw the Phantom Menace the night it came out, and I pretended to like it because I could not accept the reality that it was terrible and that Star Wars had been ruined. And so I even think I saw it like twice in the theaters, and then just kind of after about a month, just kind of went, it was bad.
yeah.
It was not good.
So
Uh,
consider taking that and Captain Marvel into consideration. Which was worse, the Phantom Menace or the Force Awakens?
the Phantom Menace was significantly worse. Like the Force
Okay.
Awakens it was sort of a tribute movie, and it was well done in the sense that it was well filmed and well acted and stuff like that. But it didn't have any real purpose. But the Phantom Menace was objectively terrible. The I feel like
No Jar Jar Binks.
the trilogy, the prequels, and the sequel trilogy are kind of mirror images of each other, and or reverse images of each other, whatever. That this prequels had a story, and they had an interesting story in there, but were very poorly made. The CGI was terrible. The acting was absolutely atrocious. The dialogue was absolute garbage, right? But in the core of it, there was an interesting story there. The problem with the sequel trilogy, very well made, beautifully shot. Like The Last Jedi, which is my probably my least favorite movie ever in the history of the world. I hate it more. I don't know. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but I hate it more than any movie I've ever
because of
seen.
what it meant.
But it was beautiful to look at, beautifully shot. The actors in it are very good. Um, the movies have some really great dialogue in them, but there's no story. There's nothing there. There was nothing that warranted being said. So if you could have just taken half of each of those things and put them together, you could maybe actually have a decent Star Wars movie. But I don't know. I mean, I think the prequels. Um, I may be a minority opinion here, but I don't. It's not interesting to me how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader, because I don't think there's a story you can, unless you're just willing to have a very unorthodox approach to it, where he just turns to the dark side and there's no explanation. That actually to me would have been really interesting. But the fact that you're going to explain it and you're going to give a reason for why he turns to the dark side, it's never as good as the mystery. It's like how most movie monsters, if the monster is concealed from us for 9/10 of the film, and then the monster comes out at the end, very rarely is the monster more terrifying than the nondescript thing that you have in your imagination. So I think that the prequels were to me a little bit of a fool's errand in trying to solve a riddle that was much more fascinating unanswered.
Might have been able to do a better job doing it in one movie. Just be like, hey, look, here's an established guy,
Yeah.
and some of these things happen. But I don't like the path to it. I never even watched the third one. I've still never seen. I haven't seen the
Yeah.
third prequel movie. I haven't seen the third sequel movie because
I've
whatever
seen
the
them
middle,
all.
whatever the middle one was of the prequels, I can't remember. Clone
Attack
Wars.
of the Clones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Attack of the Clones was so bad
Yeah.
um, that except for Yoda bouncing around, which was kind of funny to
See,
watch.
I
But
hated that.
yeah, but it was also like, okay, cool, kind of, but it's all CGI'd as opposed to
Right. Well, it didn't look real, but it also took away from me the what made Yoda a Jedi was his wisdom. And so making him a cool lightsaber wielding uh, hoppy goblin thing, just didn't work for me at all, and it cheapened it to me, because it was saying you have to be a nimble, jumpy, flippy lightsaber wielding thing in order to be a Jedi, and
yeah.
I felt like that cheapened
I thought it would have been cooler
the
if he could
mystery
just
of the
like
Jedi.
he could levitate the lightsabers and fight just without even having to move, and he stays the very solemn or very
Yeah.
you know inert almost
Right.
Yoda, and making Yoda quips the whole time though at the same,
Yeah.
just kind of like, yeah, that's cute that you can move around and everything. I don't need to do that because
Yeah.
you know. But the way that they took out Luke in The Last Jedi, I was just like, that's with a whimper for him. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm done. I can't get excited about the next
No,
movie
I
because I had
could.
to deal with all the messaging to get to that point, and I thought
Yeah.
it was really cool, like that last thing where a little bit it went over the top with how much they fought, but the fact that he was blasting and everything, fooled
Right.
you, knucklehead, and then it was just like, okay, well, I did that cool hologram, now I'm just gonna disappear.
Right.
Bye.
Yeah, I hated everything about The Last Jedi. I hate everything about it. It's my least favorite movie that's ever been made. I like
Leia getting spaced and then still making it.
right. I mean, just there's a suspension of disbelief in the universe that you create, and you can't. Um, I'll buy lightsabers and laser guns and hyperdrive and all that, hyperspace and all that stuff, but you can't be like however many movies it was, 8 movies into the franchise, and then just go, if you have the Force, you can do Mary Poppins flying in outer space.
It really,
You
it
can?
really is. It really is. This just happened.
Right.
Okay, and we want you to take this movie seriously.
Right.
And we're gonna go off to, space Vegas,
Right.
and make make obvious statements
Right.
instead of maybe subtler ones.
Yeah. And I know that I know that I know Carrie Fisher died, so whatever kind of the character arc there was cut short. But it was also like it actually would have been a really powerful moment if you had actually killed off her character then. But like she magically saves herself to do nothing.
Right. So now the only two living characters of the three are dead, and the one dead character is still alive.
Right.
Or the one dead actress is still alive.
Right. I mean, when you think about all right, so Disney paid $4 billion for Star Wars, and then never had a scene with the three main characters together.
Right.
The only thing that people really wanted, like we didn't. That was all you needed. Was for a little bit. We need Han Solo and Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker to swashbuckle in space together, and they did not do that. And they also didn't. They didn't write an outline. Like that will never not be insane to me. If you ever, I'm going to speak into the camera again. If you ever feel like you're bad at your job, just remember that a lady who was able to write a $4 billion check to make new Star Wars movies didn't take the time to just on a napkin write out a plot. Instead, they went to this guy and they go, "What do you want to do?" And he goes, "I want to remake the first movie." And they go, "But I'm going to raise a bunch of questions that we'll answer later." And they go, "Cool." And then they go to another guy and they go, "What do you want to do?" And he goes, "I don't want to answer any of the questions that last guy raised." And they go, "Cool." And then they go back to the first guy and they go, "No, all right, you make the next movie. What do you want to do?" And he goes, "I want to answer all the questions that the last guy unanswered in his last movie. So we're gonna retcon the second movie."
And then answer all in ways you don't want them answered.
The sequels were like a divorcing couple. just this is what Star Wars is. And then the next guy goes, so mom goes, "This is what Star Wars is." And then dad goes, "No, that's not. Don't listen to your mother. That is not what we're doing." And then mom comes back and goes, "Okay, well, I'm glad you had a nice weekend with dad, but this is actually what Star Wars is." And the whole time you're just like, "Can I not be caught in the middle of this? Can you just make a movie that
just make a movie I want to watch?"
A story.
And I was genuinely interested, kind of, with the idea that Rey might have been Palpatine's descendant of some sort, and that's why she's so powerful. But she's coming from the evil side, and she's going to be redeem that line because of she's going. But then I hear that no, Palpatine's still alive. Forget everything about. Now we're going to retcon the third movie, really.
Yeah, right. We're going to just gut the original trilogy. It's just like that amazing cinematic moment. So I get a little annoyed when people rank the Star Wars movies, right? And people will give Return of the Jedi sometimes a lower rating because of the Ewoks. And I get the Ewoks were corny and to sell toys, right? But half of the Return of the Jedi is absolutely the best Star Wars movie.
It's a giant space battle,
right? But in particular, the Luke and Vader storyline is the best thing that's ever happened in Star Wars. And the scene where Darth Vader is gazing upon his son who's being murdered by the Emperor and then comes to his rescue and he brings balance to the Force and he redeems himself and saves his son by, in a sacrificial act, picking up the enemy and casting him down into the pit, was cinema magic. And then J.J. Abrams is just like, "But what if he didn't die?
Yeah, what if he didn't die in the pit that blew up literally seconds later?"
What if it'd be like, yeah, on the last day, Jesus is getting ready to tosses Satan in the pit, and J.J. Abrams was like, "But what if this isn't the end?" And you're like, "No, that's we want it to be. You can tell another story after this one."
Well, that's why Satan's on Earth, because originally God was going to cast Satan in before the Earth.
Yeah.
But then J.J. Abrams said,
there are too many toys to sell. Too many Satan figurines to market. Yeah.
I'll wrap this up with one quick because I'm a huge Tolkien fan. I like Star Wars. I was a very big Star Wars fan. Tolkien fan. I just finished. Well, I'm finishing Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. I'm like half of a book left from finishing that. Big into The Witcher, and there's one other thing I'm watching that I think that's also. Oh, I'm a huge Tom Clancy fan. Read the entire Jack Ryan series. Just grew up on that. I have seen Amazon destroy Jack Ryan. I have seen Amazon destroy Wheel of Time or retcon Wheel of Time, and now I'm getting to watch them do the same thing to Tolkien. But I can watch The Witcher, and at least Netflix, for as much weird stuff as they do, at least knows how to put be somewhat true to the books. And so I'm just, and then it's been bad fandom for me for the past 10 years. So that's this is supposed to be funny, but now I'm mad at the end of
I
this.
Well, yeah. So I don't know. I watched. I don't know. I don't know anything about The Witcher and a lot of that other nerd stuff you said. I watched the first season of Jack Ryan, and then we never got around to watching the second one. Yeah, I think there's a general thing with wokeness is that it's a parasitic movement, so it doesn't create its own things. It infests things that have already been created and hollows them out and sort of wears them as a shell, which is a really frustrating thing. Like, just, I mean, remember when the Lady Ghostbusters movie came out a couple years ago, and everyone's like, you're sexist if you don't want to go see this movie that by all accounts looks really, really terrible.
Unfunny.
And you go, let's look. It's not like I wouldn't, if there were a funny looking movie about a bunch of girls who go around busting ghosts, I would go see it. It's the fact that I don't want to see a Ghostbusters without the actual Ghostbusters in it. So that's not appealing to me, you know. And so that, yeah, it's almost like a way to protect your art, your product from criticism, is you just make it woke so that you can sort of preach to the choir, and then anyone else who doesn't, and if it's bad, you can just guilt people into watching it by telling them that they're sexist or racist or homophobic or whatever if they don't like it.
It's the fact that
it's almost like it's a marketing strategy.
Well, you shoehorn in it when you try to shoehorn something in there. It looks as fake as it is, and people don't really enjoy something that's contrived. It's because
and people watch stuff for it to be an escape. It was like one of the lawyer shows that my wife watches late. Was I was watching a show with her last year, and they're filming some storyline, and the characters were in a courtroom, and they were wearing masks in the courtroom, and like had those plexiglass divider things, and you're going, who wants to see COVID on a fictional TV show?
Enough of it.
I'm trying to get away from this. This would be like if a show like is going around casting your ex-wife on the show, or whatever it is. You're like, I'm trying to get away from. That's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to, or a TV show, just they write plots around the most embarrassing moments of your day, and you turn on the TV, and Rob Lowe is playing you, from when you got the stomach flu at work earlier that day. And you're like, I don't want to relive the worst parts of my day when I watch TV. Why are you putting people in masks on the television? We're trying to live in a world where COVID doesn't exist. This is ridiculous.
Instead of a documentary, the toys that made us, the things that we hated that traumatized us, and let's watch that. No, I don't want to go through that again.
Yeah.
Hans, it's been an awesome chat.
Yeah, I had a good time, man.
I would love to get you on at some other point, down the road, to talk more about Lutheranism, because I think it's obviously something you're very passionate about.
I'm very passionate about being a Lutheran. Yes, I like it. I think everyone should try it.
Yeah,
and then keep doing it. Don't stop doing it. And if you stop doing it, don't come up to me and tell me that you're not that anymore. It will just make me sad.
Yeah. Remember that dish? He goes, I made this your favorite dish. Oh, I used to like that so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Or they go, That's nice.
Yeah, that's what I said.
But
Oh, good. Okay.
anyways, again, we finally got the humor. If you came here looking for humor, hopefully you got what you were looking for at the end. But what you did get on the way up there was a lot of good content about two guys talking about the state of the world and how we see it. Again, like this program is all about, seeing it through the lens of Christianity, through the lens of men trying to make sense of things through faith. And so, hopefully, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, I'll try to bring Hans back on, and we'll talk more about Lutheranism because I'm always interested to hear those perspectives from intelligent people full of faith. So
Well, I'm full of faith. I don't know that I'm intelligent, but
intelligent enough. We'll
that's
go with
right.
that.
I'm either the smartest dumb guy you know or the dumbest smart guy you know.
Before I do sign off, one question: do you have anything coming up? I know you do write articles in some periodicals at times. Do you
Yeah,
have
right.
anything that you
I'm back writing for the Federalist
good? Oh,
occasionally, and then I'll hopefully have some new videos coming out, but nothing imminently.
okay. Well, go like and subscribe to that page. It's hilarious, I promise.
Thank you.
And it'll only take you a couple of times. You can read the historical or the one on the History Channel, and then you'll be convinced. So, with that said, everybody, I will not be streaming tomorrow night, and I will be talking to y'all some more on Monday. So enjoy your weekend. Good night. God bless.
Goodbye.
Godspeed.